And we're back for another Patreon upload. This is an unusual one. This is on a good movie. This is on a film that's actually genuinely good, and it's actually aged pretty well. This is American History X. This is a film that is very grim, very dark, kind of depressing, but ultimately it's a pretty good movie. It's filled with some cliches and things I don't like. It's got its flaws, but overall it's aged pretty well. And it's considering the time frame which it was made, and considering where we are now politically, it aged a lot better than everyone expected. Because apparently American fascism is coming back in fashion. Oh God, it's awful. Jeez, God, what a nightmare. But yeah, it's this aged extremely well. It's a film that is not really one I'd ever choose to put on. The movie kind of feels a bit like homework. It feels like this is really important. You should watch this, but it's not one you're ever going to actively you don't ever get in the mood to watch this. It's one of those films where it's like, if it's on, I'll watch it. Or if somebody suggests watching it, just out of curiosity, or a film rescue episode. Yeah, I'll watch it. But it's never going to be one that I'm just going to be like, I get home from work and I'm going to relax to watching American History X. It's not a very relaxing film. But great performances. It's beautiful cinematography. It's very well done. Ed Norton's fantastic in it. The production of this film is actually quite interesting because it was kind of a mess. The original director kind of disowned the movie for a little while, and then eventually he said, yeah, the movie's pretty good. Ed Norton's been known to be a bit controlling on film sets. Good old Baltimore native, Ed Norton. But it's an interesting way in which we did the film rescue, and then it's basically just updated to modern day. Just, updating the original content. There was another episode on film rescue that was done before my time on the film The Warriors, and it was updating that to a futuristic setting. You can kind of take these ideas and kind of transplant them into any time frame, and it ultimately works. So this is an interesting episode. Yeah, this is kind of a little bit longer, a little bit on the back end. But ultimately, this is when Film Rescue started to tackle some good movies, just for a change. So here is the Patreon cut of the Film Rescue of American History X. Enjoy.
Oh, I didn't say Stephen Miller was smart. I said Trump thinks Stephen Miller was smart.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good.
All right. Let me do an intro here. Welcome to the Film Rescue Show. We're lending a helping hand to Hollywood in fixing their feature films. Today I have Brandon and Devin on as hosts with me.
Say what?
Yes?
Who do you have on as hosts?
Oh, damn it. Wow.
And we're off.
I don't know if I should reset or not.
No, keep in it. It's funny.
Okay. We have Brandon and Jesse here as hosts today.
Hello.
Where's Devin?
I said Devin because he initially was going to be on this one and then wasn't able to make it, but I'm seeing his name on my screen right now because I have some Manchester Media files open. I'm a parrot. I just say what I'm reading.
Speaking of which.
Speaking of which, to a conversation that none of the internet is privy to, we're talking about American History X today with Adam Peters. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. You're in a band, New Seasons. You have a song out called Temporary Release that people can check out. That's my plug at the top. I'll let him talk more about that.
It is called Temporary Relief. If
Temporary
you want to look it up.
Relief.
Relief.
Release.
With an F.
Okay, I have an F. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm half deaf. I don't know if anybody knows that. Here's how I know Adam. Adam and I came up from the same town playing in local rock bands, and he helped me write a little bit on my band's big, and I say big with air quotes, album.
It's
from
a good
a few
album.
years. It is, yeah. Well, I say big with air quotes because it's big in comparison to anything I've ever done, but not, Anyways, that's how I know. That's how I know Adam. And but however, you still just emailed into the show like a proper boy.
Well, I do know Seth well. We've known each other for a long time, but I'm a big listener of the show. I mean, I'm not the biggest film buff on earth, So like I only listen to maybe half the episodes because I've probably only seen half the movies that you guys do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I love the show, and so I just emailed in like a normal old person. Seth asked me a long time ago, right when the show first started,
Yeah.
if I wanted to be on it, but I didn't have any ideas until I revisited this movie, and that was the first time I really came up with a pitch that I thought would be good for the show.
Totally.
And
it's
then
a
he
great
was like, "Sure, we'll get to you in like a year and a half because now we're big."
That's just, that's the game, I guess.
How dare you not pick a superhero film?
Yeah, my first thought was when we were talking about things was The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That got done. The second one I had in mind, I was like, okay, well, I'll do The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That was my favorite movie, like as a kid.
And then that got done.
And that got done. That was a great episode. I enjoyed it because that was like I said, that was one of my favorite movies. One reason I didn't do that though is because I hadn't read. I just saw the movie when I was a kid and I watched it all the time, but I had never read the comics. So yeah, I didn't feel like it was right for me to come in with a pitch without knowing the source material, especially
You
because
fake fan, you.
well, I would have been also
dare
like, I would have been probably defending the movie the whole time because, like I said, it was like as a kid, it was just my favorite. So like, even though
Well, I
it's
think there's-
obviously not great, but like, I loved it. So I would have been defending it, all the horrendousness that it kind of was.
We all
I
have
think
that
that's
movie
one of
that
the-
we loved as a kid, but we know isn't very good.
But that's one of the good things about the show, though, is to have all the different perspectives, like how much experience everyone has with what franchises and like how knowledgeable you are and like where you're coming in from. Like I know that's a big thing that we like to do. It's like, oh, you haven't seen this before, or you've read this but haven't seen this, or you've seen this but you haven't read that. And it's always interesting to see like where everyone comes from.
Yeah, I
And then
agree.
the other option was the movie Green Room. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I love
Oh
Green
yeah,
Room.
I love Green Room.
Yeah, it's great. That was like, it gave me but it was like, it's not that, as for me, as a listener of the show, I only listen to episodes really when I've actually seen the movie. Otherwise, you don't really know what's going on.
Sure.
And I didn't know how popular Green Room would really be to talk about because I had issues. I loved Green Room, but I had some issues with it. But that's kind of what led me into my making the pitch for American History X.
Yeah, definitely. Because
I
Green
think
Room
American
kind
History X does things right
of.
that Green Room doesn't, and sort of vice versa.
Sure.
Yeah. Green Room is kind of just like a sort of a crime yarn film. Then American History X is more of like an introspective look at the effects of uber right-wing Nazism within America today.
Yeah.
Or I should say back in the 90s, post LA
But it's the
riots.
same. It's the
Right.
same.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, so you picked this movie specifically because you like it, and that's not like bad movies aren't a prerequisite on this show. So when you sent your email in and I read the pitch, I was like, honestly, this is just kind of like you could do this as an update on the story today if you wanted to. So I was very intrigued to have you on. And
It's different. It's different than the normal version of the show, but I love writing. I love coming up with ideas and stuff, and this was just an idea. And we can talk about, it is an updated version of it.
Sure.
But we can also talk about how we could apply this, even if it was to rewrite the '90s version. I love the movie. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies, but it also, there's aspects of it that leaves me wondering how it could have been perfected in a way to be my favorite movie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, at the top, let's, I guess, hit into the hit into the positives. We'll start with, we'll mix it up today. We'll start with Jesse.
Okay. I mean, I think we all collectively agree this is a great film.
Yeah.
It's super well done. It looks amazing. Great music. Performance by all the actors, especially Edward Norton, are fantastic. I love the shift between color and black and white to illustrate the present day versus the past. It's still definitely a hard film to watch because of the subject matter. This is not really a movie I'd ever like willingly choose to watch. It does feel a bit like homework sometimes.
Yeah.
But if it's on, I'm not going to turn it off. It's a difficult watch, but I do like movies that make you feel like absolute garbage. I like movies like that. So, but in terms of like things that really work with this film is that you could like you said earlier on, you could update this to modern day. It's sort of a timeless film. Like these ideas, Nazism has been around, even prior to World War II. It's like it started. It wasn't considered Nazism, but it's sort of dating back further and further than that. I mean, like racism itself, that goes way, way back, like long before any of our times, and will be around probably for forever. Probably never going to go away. So the story is ultimately timeless, and there have been updates of this film, like the movie Skin with Jamie Bell. Mm-hmm. It's kind of about the same subject matter, but that's based on a true story, whereas this one is fictional tale.
Right.
This one's a lot more kind of operatic compared to Skin, which is much more grounded and down to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friend of the show, Scott Thomas, was in Skin.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I'd also recommend Skin. It's also a very good film.
Skin doesn't hit, I think, the ugliness that this movie does.
This one does kind of get into there's like prison rape in this movie.
Right.
Yeah. Like that. As far as I remember, there's no rape in Skin. So
it's got a lot of 90s tropes, and prison rape is one of them.
Yeah. But I would say in terms of this film, the first half is better than the second half, and we'll get into that when we get to the negatives. But yeah, overall, it's hard to really say this is a terrible film. It's not. It's a very well done film. It's got some issues, but overall, it's hard to hate this movie. It'll make you feel like shit, but it's hard to really say it's a bad film.
Sure.
This is one of the few times on this show we've actually talked about a genuinely great film.
Right.
I think this is probably the best film we've actually talked about on this show.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. There might be movies that are more of my favorite than this one, but this, like, quality-wise, I think overall is one of the best we've ever discussed.
Yeah.
Brandon, how about you? What are some big positives that stick out to you?
Yeah, from a filmmaking aspect, I really was into the cinematography, especially considering the fact that normally I am more of a fan of the 2.35 scope widescreen style as opposed to 185, which tends to be a little more rectangular. But I like the fact that they took advantage of that by having a lot of use of wide angles, very Terry Gilliam in its appearance, actually. Kind of lends to a more distorted feel, makes you feel a little more subconsciously anxiety-riddled. Maybe that's just me, I just have anxiety anyway.
Yeah.
But no, I just feel like, in a weird way, it kind of like pulls you in, even if you don't want to be pulled in. And like I said, considering that that's not usually the type of aspect ratio I lean towards, the fact that it was still able to like pull me in, with its look and with its just general vibe, I thought was, quite an accomplishment. But aside from that, as Jesse mentioned earlier, the use of both black and white and color, not only that, I still need to do more research on this. I feel like even the film stock might have been different, aside from the fact that, it's black and white and color. I feel like the black and white might have even been reversal stock, had that very high contrast look to it. And even the way that they shot the black and white, I think they might have used color filters, because what's interesting is that if you lean into red, green, or blue before hitting that black and white film, or before settling on black and white at the very end of the process, you can change the dynamic of the white and black and grayscale in between. Like you'll notice in some of the shots, like the lips almost kind of like blend into the rest of the skin. And I think I could be wrong. I think it's when you bump up your red levels before you hit black and white. So it just had like a very intentionally unnatural look in its desaturated tones as well. So it made it feel very dreamlike or nightmare-like, and I think that just added a lot to it as well. And of course, when you pull back into color, it's very jarring, and it definitely like kind of like snaps you back to the more modern setting. So yeah, I think just the overall appearance definitely got my attention. And anytime that you can use cinematography and color to help push the story and the tone, I think you're doing something right, rather than I put the camera on the stick and I started up.
Sure.
I tried to look up what camera stock or film stock this was used on, and all I could find was 35 millimeter print. I couldn't find anything in terms of like if it's reversal or just standard 35.
Yeah, I feel like if we do enough research, we could probably find like an old what's that magazine called? American Cinematographer, I think.
Oh,
there's-
yeah.
There could be one from like 98 that talked about it, but who knows? Might have to do some more research on that. But that's funny because the cinematographer was also the director, which you don't see very often.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So,
doesn't happen often.
No, it's very rare. But you can kind of tell when that's the case because it definitely feels more like obviously the cinematographer and the director both know what they want because they're the same person in this case.
Yeah.
And I kind of do the same thing whenever I do my own short films. I'm very fickle, so I just do my own cinematography. It's like I have something in mind. This is what I want to do. But yeah, no, its appearance, it definitely pulls you in no matter how much you do not want to be pulled in.
Sure.
Although it's not really exactly what the director wanted because this is not the cut that he actually wanted.
Yeah.
Visually
we-
speaking,
We should talk. Yeah, we should talk about
angles and color. I mean,
Yeah, we should talk about like the fact that this is a 2-hour film, but the original cut was 90 minutes.
Mm.
Yeah, because Ed Norton kind of, like he usually does. We've all heard that Edward Norton is difficult to work with. He had tried to sort of take control of the editing, and the studio wanted to add more stuff back into the cut. And the original film had a much more downbeat, nihilistic ending where Ed Norton's character Derek eventually goes back to his horrible ways instead of transgressing and becoming a better person at the end. Originally, he was just going to go back to being a Nazi at the tail end of the film, but it kind of negates his whole journey if you do that. But the director wanted it's like a quote-unquote grounded movie, not so operatic that it is now. It was much more downbeat and depressing, even more so than we already have.
Yeah.
But Ed Norton didn't want to do that. The studio didn't really want to do that, and eventually the director kind of disowned the film. Tried to take his name off of it, but he couldn't do it. But he eventually saw the film years later, and he actually thinks that it's a good film now. So, this is one of the few times where I'd actually say that the studio was right. I don't think making this film even more nihilistic would help it.
No.
If anything, it would hurt it.
No.
Yeah, it kind of would go back on some of the tenets and ideas that the film's trying to bring to light through this story. Like the reason that it goes to those dark places is to point out, the the ignorance and hypocrisy and things like that, and to end on, he goes back anyway because it's
Because if you were to have that ending where he goes back to Nazis, and the film is basically saying, "Oh yeah, he was totally right the whole time."
right.
Yeah, it would kind of
also-
it gives the wrong message.
It would not stand up well to history either. I don't know
No.
if you ever go
No.
into YouTube comments on things regarding this film, Nazis love this film, or at least parts of it. And if that was the ending, if the original ending had been the ending, they would really love this film.
Oh,
and it would
absolutely.
be pretty much completely unenjoyable for any other audience at that point. And the director would have accidentally made basically a propaganda movie in much the wrong way.
Wow. Yeah.
Don't look at YouTube comments is what I'm saying. You're just
Yeah.
going to be sad.
Almost never is that a good option.
But their attention to detail on their symbols and alt-right imagery. I don't know if that wasn't really the right term back then, but the far-right imagery and stuff that they use is really impressive, especially back in the 90s when it wasn't, a lot of these things weren't quite as known as they are now.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of these small things that you see on the walls and stuff, but also like something I didn't catch the first time I watched it in the basketball scene. Seth's wearing a jersey with the number 88 on the back, which
Yeah.
the eighth letter of the alphabet is H. Stands for Hail Hitler.
Right.
Or
Just
or you
and
could
the-
say Heinrich Himmler.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, that
either
one
one.
too.
But yeah, the attention to detail in that and it is really impressive, and one of the most interesting things about the movie. Because of what I do in work, I've done it has led me. I did some work on hate crime related legislation in my job, and had to do a lot of research into ultra far right politics and symbolism, and hate crimes, and it kind of led me into this interest in anti-fascist and also fascist films and art, and which is one reason why this movie's always spoke to me a lot.
Sure.
As well as other movies, in that realm, V for Vendetta, Inglourious Bastards, but at the same time, to have a knowledge of this subject, you also have to look at the art on the other side that that is not as enjoyable to look at. I've seen some very such as in this movie they have the Nazi punk band, and Seth sings a very racist Nazi song, and
Right.
They talk about Cameron being a distributor of all this far right literature and stuff, and I've had to read that stuff and listen to that stuff, and it's not great, not a good time.
Yeah.
So anyway, but because of that knowledge, I appreciate a lot of the attention to detail they put in those things in this movie.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that 88 thing. That's a good catch.
Yeah.
The best piece of imagery that I noticed is in Cameron's office when you see there's an image of Adolf Hitler, and right above it is a picture of Jesus. It's like they clearly idolize Hitler.
Yeah, you see a ton of
as a Christ-like figure.
You see a ton of the crossover of Nazi flags and American flags being used in the same room, in the same, in the way that they coexist in a way that in that world and in that political sphere that people don't maybe realize. They often see these two symbols as opposing each other, what many people might think, but to them, they're
inseparable.
they coexist. And you even just as you might see, for example, where Seth and I grew up, a Confederate flag flying next to an American flag. These symbols that coexist, that your train of logic and your understanding of history seems like it shouldn't, but you have to them they coexist, and it's interesting to try to understand. You have to try to understand that perspective. You don't agree with it, but that's the only way you're going to really know what's going on in this movie and in art like this.
Yeah. I mean, we live in Maryland, so we're right on the Mason-Dixon line, so we see really smart people, and then we also see people that the day that our current president, Donald Trump, got elected, the very day I saw a guy put a Confederate flag outside of his house.
Yeah.
It's hard to discuss this film and not discuss the Trump era of America.
Yeah, and we'll get into that because I want that to be in the negatives more than anything.
Yeah, let's put that in the negatives. Yeah.
I have a little anecdote for that too. This was my first time watching this movie.
Really?
Yeah. So this, I've been aware of it. Brandon, this was also your first watch, right?
Correct.
So, obviously this is like a kind of big part of this social zeitgeist. And, I've seen like the bite the curb scene was going around as like, a clip. So I was familiar with how ugly this movie was going to be in its presentation and like basically what it was about, but I wasn't sure of the whole story. And one of the things that hit me, actually, because it's been a day or two since I've watched it, the score of this movie exists in Danny's head, and that makes the whole film just really interesting to me. And for reference, if you watch the basketball scene, the score is just very overtly informing you that your protagonists are winning.
It sounds like heroic music that's playing, but you remember, oh, right, they're Nazis.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The film is presenting it instead of this is a hard thing to do, right? When you have movies where your protagonist is kind of also your antagonist, or they have to go from being a bad person to a very bad person to a redeemed person across the course of the film, you run into the issue of like, how do you make your main character likable? And having Danny in this film is like the audience POV, the score, the way that all the previous stuff is shot. Brandon, you mentioned the cinematography, how all the ugliness makes you anxious. All of that is presented, I think, through the lens of Danny, who was watching it and kind of telling the story for his homework project, even to the point where when Derek is being kicked out of the party, the music is sad.
Yeah.
The music
that's the only people that he actually connects with in any way, and now that's all taken away from him.
Right, but it's also sad because Danny's now disappointed in his own brother. He's seeing overtly his older brother, who was, as they were saying, a god to them, is now not part of the community and being kicked out and potentially going to die. And so the movie presents us as like a disappointment in Derek, and it's not until later where we get the extended jail history scene that we kind of see these characters turn things around. I just thought it was a really interesting choice, and it allowed for the movie and the score to be exactly what you would expect from a protagonist story, but through a totally different lens and context. That it kind of gives like a very unique dissonance to me as I was watching, because I even said it out loud as I was watching the basketball scene. I was like, our main character just took his shirt off and we're seeing a swastika, and the music is informing me that he's winning and I should be excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
While Seth's wearing an 88 jersey.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, that's a really good point that you're pointing out, and something. I mean, I noticed a lot of things, and if you ever watch it again, I think you will too. A lot of things on the second watch and the third watch. That's a really interesting thing that I didn't pick up on, but that makes with the score being from Danny's perspective, that makes a ton of sense. You're right. I mean, they put a heroic thing. They like you said, it's a confusing, interesting way to go about it. Of when you have your protagonist is a very bad person, and that's a really interesting thing to pick up on. I kind of don't like the basketball scene as a whole, and maybe that's just because it's so 90s.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And looking back on it, it is like painfully cringe. And am I supposed to believe that the My Name Is Earl guy and Edward Norton are going to beat these guys in basketball?
Right.
Yeah. Have you seen that guy recently? He's in amazing shape now.
Amazing. We'll get to that later. He looks great. He's awesome.
Let's add that to the positives. He looks great
absolutely.
now. Yeah.
I mean, he's always been everything he's in, he's good. I mean, he kind of plays the same character all the time. Not always a Nazi, but like kind of like a dopey friend a little bit. But I always enjoy seeing whatever he's in.
I finally got around to watching The Hunt, even though I swore I wouldn't. And it is...
Oh, no.
It's 20% less as bad as I thought it was going to be. There is a little more nuance to it than the synopsis would have informed. However, what is it? Ethan Suplee? Yeah. He's in that, and it like buff form Ethan, and he is just a highlight of the film. He's just wonderful. I love him so much. So Adams, are there any other positives you'd like to pick out? I could go on for days about the acting in the different scenes, the dinner scene specifically, the way that's edited and shot. Just I was ready to just run out of the room screaming.
That's the Oscar nomination moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Fairuza Balk, who plays Stacy. I mean,
Fairuza Balk, yeah.
Yeah, not my
the chick
crush.
the chick from Waterboy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd only seen her in Waterboy before seeing this movie, but she's
been in a lot of stuff. She's actually a genuinely good actress. She still acts.
Yeah.
Definitely one of my early childhood crushes.
Oh yeah.
I like when they call her a Democrat as like an insult. Like that's the hardest word they could throw against her.
That's the harshest you can get. Yeah. This movie even it calls out like Hillary Clinton at one point as like her liberal ideology, and I'm thinking to myself, in today's world, I'm like, Hillary Clinton as a liberal? It's hard to really consider that, considering the things we know about Hillary Clinton today.
The curve has shifted.
The curve slightly shifted.
Its ability to not tell the future, but the way it stands the test of time because of how it predicted some things in terms of how they organize with the internet. They
Right.
talk about after Derek's out of prison. They talk about we're gonna shift. We like your hair long. We're gonna shift away from the skinhead thing. I mean, you don't really see skinhead groups anymore. The same ideology exists, but the style is gone because
Right.
they integrated and they try to integrate more into mainstream society, and the movie takes place maybe a couple years before it came out, so there's a little bit, they had a little bit of foresight in that regard.
Yeah, they mentioned
still.
Rodney King and the LA riots.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's
There-
like 92, 93, somewhere around there.
So he's using like a home computer as well, and I know there's at least like some mentions of internet or the beginnings of the internet. And I
Yeah.
remember when back when forums were like, the only kind of internet interaction you could get, early 2000s, the idea of like neo-Nazi nests on the internet was talked about like a boogeyman that didn't really actually exist. And finding out in future years that like, nope, that was they were kind of like the pioneers
No,
of this. Like
They
you
were
just-
so good at it. I mean, the way I think, and this is I don't have the evidence back it up. I think that's how. I mean, imagine in school how common Holocaust jokes were.
yeah,
I think their ability to organize and then infiltrate mainstream sites back at that time with their far right things in a comedic way. I mean, they were doing that starting in the 90s and forever, and getting those ideas into mainstream society.
Yeah. Or even like the fact that they say they're moving away from being skinheads, they're going to stop shaving their heads. Like, it's because, look at today, like most of the most popular actors and athletes, they have shaved heads.
yeah,
Like being bald or having a shaved head or having just stubble on your head is now extremely popular. It's considered like a sexy thing for men to do that, or even women to do that. So
Jesse, you're just saying that because you shaved your head.
I got tired of not being able to get a haircut, so I went full Lex Luthor. But in terms of like going mainstream, they mentioned that, and it's like the ideas of Nazism and uber right wing mentality has infiltrated not just popular areas of our culture, but even like our governments. Like John Boehner, who's now no longer in the government, thank God. He came out a few years after he was voted out of office, and he said, yes, there are Nazis in the United States Senate. Like it's mainstream now. Like if only he was in a position of power to do something about it. Oh, right. But yeah, it's like you have that situation where it's like they did predict that they were going to go bigger, and now they're part of our government. And people forget, like in World War
in my job, I work in the political realm, and I work with a lot of government representatives, and the behind the door conversations are more extremists than you would be led to believe, because people that go into full force into being an elected official, they are ideologues, and they hold these positions very firmly, and sometimes you don't see the full thing, but yeah, it's entered the mainstream. Whether it's been there this whole time, not sure, but it's another one of those things that this movie is able to predict very well.
yeah.
People forget in World War II, there were people in America praising Nazism.
Yeah,
There were entire rallies praising Hitler in America during World War II. People forget this.
It's got 10-year cycles on it, right? Where like
Yeah, it's like every 10 years, it goes underground, it comes back. It goes underground, it comes back. Like Bush era, it was out. Obama era, it was away. Now Trump era, it's back. Hopefully, come November, that will change.
right.
If you're listening to this podcast a year from now and things have changed, good. We finally predicted the future positively. If not, well, I guess that means the apocalypse is going to come pretty soon.
And this movie doesn't even point out like the 80s struggle. Like punk as a genre exists against these ideologies.
Oh, yeah.
And this wasn't an era of people, debating each other or,
it was Sharp Divide.
It was fist fights. Like people were going to jail for seeing, Nazi symbolism and, people who ran along those ideals, they were getting the shit beat out of them by the actual punks who were like anti-government,
Early days of Antifa, I guess you could say.
Anti-establishment, and they were literally beating the shit out of these guys in the streets. And then the 90s, again, you see it come back around with this story, and then the early 2000s again on the internet and on YouTube, that got just insane. And here we are, 2020, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
Wild. Sorry, Brandon.
Meh.
Let's get more
It's
into
hard to not be political with this film.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's about. So
I think it's time to launch into the negatives.
All right.
And I want to start this segment with a game called Who Said It? Derek Vineyard or Donald Trump? It's
take a shot every time you get the answer wrong or right, because it doesn't matter.
yeah, it's a great game. You can't lose because you can. And this I'm basing off of the scene just before they break into and terrorize. I won't even say vandalize. They terrorize that grocery store.
It was about completely just destroying that place and
Right.
terrorizing all the people that were there.
And in his tirade before that, there are exact lines almost
Yeah.
said in this film that was created in 1998 that were said from presidential podiums in 2016 and on. That was kind of weird, right, guys?
I kept checking the date on the movie. I was like, this. I was like, oh, that's a pretty funny reference to Trump there. And then I was like, oh wait, never mind.
Yeah.
1998.
What a
same thing
coinkydink.
happened with that same thing happened with well, I think the movie's called Look Who's Back. Have you ever seen that?
I have not.
No.
It's a German movie where Hitler comes back to
Oh,
life.
that's
yeah.
right. I've seen that. Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what his line was, but it was directly something Trump had said, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty funny reference to Trump and everything, and then the movie came out in like 2013 or something. Like it was not the timing was not right. So
Yeah.
that was a bummer.
So as far as things structurally that don't work about this movie, let's get into that first. The second half we've mentioned has, I think, more issues than the first. I think overall, if I had to pick one thing that didn't work for me in the second half, it's just the pacing. It feels slow and rushed at different times, and that's a really good way to give whiplash, I think, to your audience. So if I had an overall, to be fair, I think the pacing within the like scene to scene editing just doesn't quite hold up, and that could just be a 90s thing too. You know what I mean? Like that's not my wheelhouse. And as an editor, I'm trying to stay on top of editing, trends and not looking back as often as maybe I should. So it could be a personal thing. If you disagree with me, you're totally within your rights. But for me, I felt a little jerked around, especially the last 5 minutes when they're walking to school and running into Sweeney and the shooting at the school. All of that just felt like
There are times the editing just left me, at least the first time I watched it, just confused.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out. I love movies that make you think afterwards and try to figure out what things represent and symbolisms and stuff. But this left me trying to figure out literally what was happening and literally what they were talking about in some aspects. And one of those examples, like you're saying, when they're walking to school. And the police talk to Derek, and they say, "Oh, Cameron and Seth were jumped the night before, and they're in the ICU." And the previous night, Derek had beaten the crap out of Cameron and had some sort of an altercation with Seth, but that's not the altercation they were referring to. It was another altercation.
Yeah, it feels
But
like a scene is missing.
Yeah, absolutely. A scene's missing, but the fact that the party scene happened where he beat the crap out of Cameron, I'm just like, I think that's why he's in the ICU, but that's not why he's in the ICU. And he's telling him. Then they tell Derek, you know what you need to do? You need to go talk to your friends. And I'm like, wait, why? Why does he need to do that? And what does he need to do?
Right.
And I can't figure out what is happening there. Another example is when like a scene or two after the grocery store scene is the dinner scene,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking about these immigrant-owned grocery stores, or minority-owned grocery stores, I should say, being like destroyed, right? But then they start talking about the Rodney King riots, and that's what they were talking about. They weren't talking about the minority-owned grocery store getting ransacked that we literally just watched happen. So it took me till halfway through the scene to realize we're talking about something else. So it just left me. It's maybe some editing choices, how the scenes were stacked together. And I mean, I know this used to happen a lot more than it does now, but I saw a trailer last night for this movie where, and you guys know what I'm talking about, where 60% of the scenes were not in the movie.
Yeah.
And then another 30% were in the movie, but these were different takes or different versions of it, including one where Danny is in a much more of a physical altercation with the kid who ends up killing him. And that was one thing that left me confused near the end of the movie was the kid killing Danny, because it was to me it was like, well, did he kill him just because he blew smoke in his face? That seems like not enough of a reason to kill somebody.
Yeah.
It seemed extreme, but it's implied that people it's implied people know that he's actually part of the Nazi skinhead group, but it's never overtly said that people know that.
To me, the second and third times I saw it, I start to see some things and connect that, okay, maybe the killing was related to Derek because that kid knows the guys who were in the same group as the guys Derek killed.
Yeah.
And you see the same car going around, but that took me the second time of piecing these things together. And I always, which is fine. It's good to see a movie another time and see it a different way and know some things, but it honestly left me confused, and it made for a great shocking ending, but that was a little weird. And like I was saying, in this trailer, they had a much more of a physical altercation with shoving, and that might have made the ending actually not be as confusing.
Yeah. So we had discussed this movie leading up to this episode, and I wanted to do some looking because I left our conversation more confused. And what I was able to find was there's a subplot that was dropped specifically about the Crips. So this is 90s California. Bloods vs. Crips is like kind of something that would have been on your mind in 98 that is not on our mind as much watching it now. Yeah. And the three guys that Derek kills at the beginning are Crips. And the kid who Danny disrespects is also a Crip, and he had just joined them recently, and that's why he was in the altercation with the kid at the very beginning of the movie. Was about basically like that kid was trying to do the 90s after school special, like you don't need to join a gang kind of thing. That was a dropped subplot that I found in some interviews. That kind of explains what should have happened, and half of this didn't even get written, but it was going to be like because he was disrespected, and also his full induction into the gang is to kill somebody. So that
makes sense.
Yeah, that was something
that could have helped make a lot of sense.
Exactly. And then
it would have, had you had a little bit more of a Crip subplot to it, it would have helped emphasize the hate. The hate is learned, right? Like that kid that kills Danny learns it from these older guys, and Danny learned it from these older guys. It would have, and that's something I was able to figure out second watch and later on, but I think that would have driven that point home a lot harder. And
it was the Crips that attacked Seth and Cameron on their way to the hospital after the altercation with Derek. That was just going to be an unrelated. They just saw skinheads and started shooting.
And I thought maybe that was also because they knew Derek was out, and that they knew these guys were with Derek, and they were trying to basically get back at Derek, because you see that car drive by Derek's home, you don't know if it's necessarily related to Danny or it's related to Derek.
Exactly.
But again, these were things I couldn't pick up until a second watch.
And then
that could have just been me.
And then the final thing I was able to glean, I rewatched the restaurant scene, or the diner scene at the end. At least half of that is ADR. That was shot, I think, during the reshoots to add to the movie, and then they just added as much ADR to get you to the end as possible without having to go back and shoot the scenes for context. So that's why they just show up, and literally all the ADR is like, you need to go talk to them, but I can't.
Yeah.
You know, like the conversation kind of goes nowhere, and then the movie doesn't really follow up on it either. It's not like he gets a chance to. So that was like basically a lot of stuff that should have been written and then shot that got dropped. But it's something that I think they were leaning on the fact that in 1998 you would have been thinking about Bloods and Crips in California at the time. And so it maybe you would have filled gaps in your head better than we did in 2020 going, what happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like we said, this is a timeless story, so you can apply this to any time frame, really.
Exactly. Brandon, do you have any lurking issues with the film? Anything that doesn't work for you at all?
I think those were the main points, just some pacing and editing issues there, but certainly nothing egregious to really like pop out immediately. It's more like later on you're thinking about it and you're like, yeah, that could have been fine-tuned a little better than what we got. But aside from that, nothing overtly egregious that I can add to.
Okay. Jesse, how about you? Anything that doesn't work for you in the latter half?
I mean, like we said, it doesn't feel as strong because, like we said, the pacing is a little bit messy, but also there's a trope in film that I don't really like called the magical black man trope. Yeah, we discussed this where, like, in a lot of films, there's about characters that need, like, a sort of a mentor figure. There's always the magical black man that teaches them a better way of thinking or guides them to a different way of thinking. Like, Platoon is the one I think of the most obviously.
There's one that's basically that as the plot of the movie. The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Bagger Vance.
That's
oh my
right. Yeah.
gosh, dude.
Yeah, it's like there's the magical black man character.
He's
Yeah,
literally
it's-
a magical black man. Like,
Yes,
He just
literally a
disappears
magical
like
black
a
man.
wizard.
Yeah.
There's a hilarious Key and Peele skit where they
Oh, yeah.
it's just like two old black janitors talking to like a CEO, and they start like doing the wizard battle in front of them.
Yeah. I know what you mean, Jesse, and I think this might be like the best version of that bad trope.
Yeah.
It adds the most
It's
heart
grounded
to the movie.
enough. It's grounded enough. It doesn't bother me too much, but it is still a trope because when Derek is in prison, here's his workmate that he's working with. For some reason, that's the thing that shifts him away from an entire lifetime of learning to hate people that are of non-Anglo white descent.
Right.
Yeah, it's like that's the one thing that shifts him away. It seems a little too convenient sometimes.
Mm.
But,
I agree with you 100%, Jesse. And
Yeah.
I think, because we had talked about that earlier, and I was thinking about it today. And they made, so I killed Lamont in my pitch.
Oh.
Mm.
Lamont, he's a good character, but I killed him because I think that would, it could have an impact on Derek's development. Also, they made Lamont too perfect.
Yeah, there's really nothing to his
He's
character
a
beyond
spotless individual, and that's it. It's saying like the only way Derek could finally meet a non-white person that he liked was the most perfect person that can be in prison, where he committed a very minor crime and then he ended up in jail for longer. But like, all he did was steal a TV. He's absolutely such a nice guy. Doesn't really have that much baggage or anything. He's funny. Whereas I think if Lamont had more of maybe an aggressive or hateful past, maybe he was in a gang or something, and Derek and him could connect on their pasts, right? And how they're both struggling to move forward, could have been less of that trope that requires Lamont to be so perfect and magical, and where you bring in that magical aspect is when the only way he gets out of prison alive is because it's inferred that Lamont tells the black prisoners to
leave him alone.
Leave Derek alone. Like yeah. And he has to pull that just to get our white protagonist out of there to go live his life, and then Lamont stays in prison for more years.
Right.
And I think Lamont could have been a more well-developed and deeper character that helped in his development, and because I didn't like that he had to be so perfect. Meanwhile, Derek has, he's killed guys and he's ransacked a grocery store, and he's got a
he's a horrible person. He's done way,
he's a horrible
way
person.
Worse. Way worse.
Meanwhile, Lamont has to be perfect for Derek to even have any respect for him.
Well, I would argue like the idea that Lamont is in there for a long period of time for such a minor crime. Like, look at what happens today.
Yeah, I
people,
think that
people that are in prison for years and years because they had some pot in their car. Like, seriously, like it's just a means of it's a means of law enforcement to juke stats. This is well documented that they will juke stats and they will arrest people for very, very minor crimes and slap extra charges on top, because the more people you get on your rap sheet, the better it seems like the police force is doing. The more your ranking goes up, the more, the possibility you'll get for a promotion or a raise. It's, like every season of The Wire is basically about this.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's not unfair to say like, hey, the cops are fucking with the stats. Like it happens. Like
which is another thing where it's crazy that Derek. To me, it was crazy that they only had him in for 3 years, because they, as a gang leader, there's no way they weren't investigating him for other stuff and could have pulled from other stuff. And it makes the movie convenient, but there's no way he wasn't already under suspicion for the grocery store thing. I'm sure there were some other crimes he committed. They've been trying to pin stuff on Cameron. They'd already said that earlier in the movie. I'm sure they were trying to do the same with Derek. So the fact that they were only able to get him for 3 years for what he had done, it's convenient for the movie.
Yeah, but it's a contrivance for the sake of convenience.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot. There's at least 3 big gimme moments in this that are like, hey, the story is supposed to be emotionally connective and not, this isn't a mystery. We're not, unveiling, who committed the worst crimes here. So I think there are definitely some gimme moments, like the manslaughter being his charge after, killing 3 people in self-defense only because his brother wouldn't testify. And like, that's never actually said. We only read that for a minute on screen. There's definitely a few, at least, in this, but at the same time, like they didn't take the time, and this is again the pacing issue for me. His story of when he was in prison is very, very, very long, and they take a lot of time to talk about prison life when they could have been using those scenes to set up like him running into people that got way worse sentences than him. It doesn't have to be just Lamont. It could be literally everybody else he interacts with across the movie that isn't white.
It's like I said, this film is much more operatic. It's the convenience that at the end of the film, the kid that Edward Furlong blows smoke in his face. He's the same person that shoots him at the tail end of the movie at the exact same location. It feels like a bookend. It does feel very movie-like.
It's very Shakespearean. The whole
very
thing is
Shakespearean,
very
but
Shakespearean.
Where compare that to something like the death of Omar in season 5 of The Wire. It's just some random kid that shoots him in the head.
Right.
It's a totally random shooting. It's just like he's buying a pack of cigarettes and blam, like Omar, this guy who's been like a symbol of the neighborhood, Black Punisher, is just offed randomly. Right. And then it doesn't even get into the front page of the news because they had to move him to the page 10 of the Baltimore Sun because they couldn't have space for it. And then that's the end of Omar's time on The Wire. It's a random killing, like that just takes out this major figure of Baltimore.
Right.
Yeah.
Was he based on anybody real?
I don't believe so. I think most of those characters are inspired by people, but I think Omar is a total invention. They just needed
Yeah.
like a vigilante type to sort of go around and, be a threat to Stringer Bell.
Right.
Yeah, but I think there are actual criminals in that show that do serve as characters on the show, like the guy that he becomes friends with the oh god, it's been so long since I watched The Wire. The guy that's supposed to help build the new education program for Baltimore County schools. He actually he did run a gang, and then he got arrested, reformed, and now he's an activist in Baltimore.
Wow.
Yeah, then he
That's
actually is friends with the guy that arrested him. Because they admitted, like, yeah, it's all a game. It's just, it's a game of cat and mouse, and eventually you get caught. Everybody gets caught eventually. Yeah, so.
Adam, anything else you want to touch on? I know you had a few bullet points in the email you sent. I want to make sure we hit on everything.
There was one more thing.
Yeah, I think
one other thing I wanted to add. I did talked with a friend of mine out in Venice Beach. This film takes place in Venice Beach. A friend of mine lives out in Venice Beach, Joshua Dysart, who's a comic book writer. He's lived in Venice Beach, I think, for about 25 years, something like that. And I asked him if he wanted to join on the episode because it would be nice to have a Venice native to help provide some insight. Because I asked him, like, is this really what Venice Beach was like back in the 90s? And because it felt a little bit inaccurate at times. So I asked him about it. He's not available to jump on tonight, obviously, but he's probably busy. 3-hour time difference.
Right.
But his tweet to me said, "My first instinct is that there is some racism on the beach, but before the great corporatization, it was always an incredibly diverse place with very little segregation. So an open hate group would probably get their ass handed to them pretty fast." So it's not totally accurate. This film does take some liberties with the world of Venice Beach, even back in the 90s. So, it'd be good to have him on.
I always
on the
found, I mean, even in my research, and of hate groups starting back in the 50s, I always found the location of the film to be odd. But I'm sure there's stuff out there that I just don't know about. But the Pacific Northwest up in like Oregon was more of a big haven for that, and you see that in Green Room.
Yeah.
Or even like one of the most racist cities in America right now, New York City.
Sure.
It's like
there's a huge Proud Boys rallies there.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Identity Europa that happened there.
Yeah.
Basically some of the modern equivalents.
Yeah. This seems like the more slammed together people are, the more toxic the community becomes.
Yeah, I think they specifically picked Venice Beach just because if you put minorities into a like the small minorities in like kind of more distant towns, Pacific Northwest, it's really, really hard to get your evolving protagonist to look sympathetic versus if there's whole gangs, if it feels like it's gang versus gang versus gang, you can kind of focus in on the microcosm a little more. Again, this is, one of the gimmies of the movies, just like, let us have this and it'll make sense where we're going with this.
This movie wouldn't really work if you set it in like Mississippi or Alabama.
Oh, God, no.
No, it wouldn't work. It's definitely a product of its location. So they take some liberties, but it's not too bad. But that's just the only thing I wanted to address.
Totally.
I would have liked to see bigger roles out of. I think there could have been at least one scene where Davina plays a bigger role. She's clearly she's a smart, studious student, but and liberal, but she can't get through to Danny in any way, and whereas only Derek can do it. I would have liked to see there some sort of bigger role for Davina. And then I would have liked to see a bigger role for Cameron, just a couple more scenes maybe. I mean, Cameron to me was the main antagonist.
His girlfriend too, Feroza Balk's character, she just kind of disappears at the halfway point of the film.
No, she pops back in at the end to be
she stays with the ideology, and she stays with Cameron.
Yeah, but it would be nice to have her appear again at the end of the film. Did she appear at the end? I can't remember.
Nope.
No.
Yeah,
she's gone after the party.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Is like she should have appeared like more towards the end in some way.
We needed an extra day, I think.
Yeah, it feels like it needs like a denouement. The movie just kind of stops. Yeah, that's the one thing I would say is that the movie needs a little bit more a little bit more on the tail end of the film.
Yeah.
So, but that's
Yeah,
just me.
I agree, Adam. I think Davina having at least a makeup scene with him. You know what I mean? Like a hey, I'm changing.
Yes.
This isn't me anymore. I'm
And there
sorry.
was one in that trailer I referred to,
Right.
and where there were all these other scenes, and the scene where Danny first walks into the apartment and they're all hugging, and he says, "Give the guy some space," and
Yeah.
Derek's hugging Davina and the mom. In the trailer that I saw, that's where he was telling the mom and Davina. 'Cause it's kind of weird. They were just like were they just holding themselves like that for hours? What was the
Yeah.
in this scene? That's where he was telling them, "Look, I'm done with this gang and this way of life. I'm gonna figure something out, get us some money, get out of here. I'm gonna get Danny out too. Like we're moving past this." That was maybe it would have been a bigger scene for Davina.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, Cameron would have liked to see a bigger scene because I see him as the personification of the ideology, and I see the ideology as the main antagonist of the film. But I thought the performance of I don't know what the actor's name is that plays Cameron was great.
Stacy Keach.
Yep.
Yeah, he plays that role great.
Yep.
You see that role come up a lot in these movies. Patrick Stewart plays essentially the exact same role in Green Room.
Yeah.
And that is how a lot of those things were, where you have this older ideologue who needs a way to push his ideology out there, and he finds these confused, angry kids and it shows that at the party. He's like, "Oh, look, I have all this music. I have beer for the kids. Like, come in. This is my haven. You guys just
Right.
have to help me push my ideology on this area." I would have liked to see a little bit more of that, but I love the scene where Derek is in his office and he calls him out on all of this. He realized that Derek had been used since the beginning, and I would have liked to see him he does it with Stacy, where he tries to tell Stacy like let's leave it, this is bullshit.
Yeah. Get out of here.
I would have
with
liked
me.
to try to see him do it with Seth and it fall flat.
Yeah.
Because I think Seth is a more important character than Stacy. Also, I mean, Stacy doesn't show Stacy visit him at all in prison or anything.
Right.
I would have liked to see him. You see him still caring about Seth when he comes to the apartment. And Seth he's obviously an evil guy, but he's an exterminator, a bug exterminator. He's a blue collar guy who's just like angry and confused, and is also being used by Cameron to push that ideology. I would have liked to try to see a scene like that,
Yeah.
where he tries to get through to him, and it would have fallen on deaf ears, but it would have been interesting to see.
Yeah. I like that.
And there's a deleted scene where after the party, and it's right before they get jumped, where Cameron tells Seth, like, "Yeah, I mean, if you lose some weight, grow your hair out, you could be the next Derek." And I really liked that scene because it's like, okay, Derek's not going to work, so now I need to use Seth because Seth really believes in this.
Right.
I can use Seth as my new organizer, my new leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Seth's such a tragic character to me. He falls into that realm of, I mean, I hate seeing a character that I don't like having my name. It's a weird, my name's not popular by any means. There's not a lot of Seths out there. So anytime it gets said by my TV, I'm like, hey, wait.
Same here.
Yeah. Yeah, main characters named Brandon don't happen.
Yeah, unless
often, do
you
they?
have a movie called Shame where the character is a horrible sex addict.
I knew you were going to say it.
A documentary. Yeah, so I think we're about ready to take a break, and when we come back, we can get into a fantastic pitch. Adam, would you like to tell people where they can find you on the internet? What you up to?
Yeah, please check out my band. We're called New Seasons. We only have one song out right now, so only one thing to listen to. The song's called Temporary Relief, so look it up on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, wherever. New Seasons, Temporary Relief. The Instagram for our band is at New Seasons Music. If you want to find me personally, I'm on Instagram. My full name, Adam Morris Peters. It's just, photos of me and my dog. I used to be really active on Twitter. I'm trying to chill on that because like I'm just bummed all the time.
Yeah.
So, because Twitter is Twitter. So if you want to see me and my dog, check out my Instagram, check out my music. Other than that, just just a normal guy. I work in politics and have an interest in this sort of thing and these type of movies.
Hell yeah. I love how there was like a period where everyone was shitting on Instagram because it was like, this is people's fake life. This is their best life. And now everyone's going, yeah, I don't know. I kind of prefer that over the Twitter version.
I get that perspective, but like, I like seeing people happy. I mean,
Crazy, I know.
Maybe it's just me. I like seeing someone's like, hey, look, here's me with my dog, or here's me climbing a mountain. I'm like, that's great. That's so fun.
Yeah.
Look at you. You're doing great. I haven't seen you since I haven't seen you since freshman year of college, but look at you. Looks like you're doing great.
Right.
I like that stuff.
Dude, like half my shit is either my cats or shit that I've cooked. That's all my Instagram is, really.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm here for the positivity now. 2020, I'm getting different energies. Yeah, so please go check out new season's Temporary Relief, their only song. So that's only 3 minutes of homework. That's the time it would take you to listen to this next segment.
And if you follow, you will see the new songs that come out because there will be more.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's we'll be right back with the pitch. In the meantime, I do not know what Mike will do for the segment of this show.
That's going to be interesting.
If I had to guess, it would be Edward Norton roles.
Yeah.
And
I'm scared he's going to shit on me for like wanting to rework this movie.
Oh, that's
in any way.
That's definitely going to happen because he doesn't understand what this show is.
Right. Well, in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen episode, he's like, "Oh, what a great movie," and then by the end, he's like, "Oh, this is a 2 out of 10." What are you talking about?
Yeah, he's the heel, and let me turn it over to the heel. We'll be right back.
Oh my God. American History X. This is going to be a fun episode. Welcome to the only part of this podcast that is going to be a positive listening experience. Oh my God, did I just say this was a positive listening experience? Boy, oh boy. I don't know what's going on, but I need to check in somewhere. Speaking of checking in, Ed Norton needs to be checked in somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Fuck Ed Norton. What a douchebag. Like, this, welcome to Michael's Film Whatever, Ed Norton getting shit on edition. What a pretend, like, if you want the definition of someone who has fucked their career to no end after being one of the biggest actors in the fucking world, you just need to look at Ed fucking Norton. You are a douchebag. Like, what the fuck? First off, you were a good Banner. Good is a positive word for this. But, man, dude, what are you doing? Let's talk about The Incredible Hulk. It fucking sucks. Who the fuck made this movie? This was a Phase 1 MCU movie, mind you, after Iron Man came out and killed it. This movie fucking blew, and honestly, Ed Norton's part of the problem. And then you find out that he fucking wanted to fight people over this movie. Dude, it's the Hulk, okay? The Hulk story is easy to tell. And also, do you really think that we're going to get multiple Hulk movies? Like there's going to be a Hulk trilogy? No, dude, you can tell Hulk's story through everybody fucking else's. He's not that big. Like, what the fuck? You know who has a great story? She-Hulk. She's getting her own TV show. Boom, done. Fuck off, Ed. Fuck off, Norton. You piece of shit. The movie's a 4. On the Ed Norton scale, he probably thought it was like a 9. God in heaven does he get on my nerves. And you know what? You guys remember The Prestige? Did you remember that Ed Norton did one called The Illusionist? You don't? Oh, because I apparently am the only one who fucking saw this piece of shit. It's not good either. And he also started fights on that movie set. The movie came out 2 years before Hulk, and this motherfucker is on set talking about how illusionists act. Motherfucker, they're illusionists. No one gives a shit. You're in this B movie that no one's gonna fucking see. I think Jessica Biel's in it or some bullshit. And it's dumb. It's fucking stupid. And you're like, I'm just gonna go watch. Like, you leave the movie theater to go see The Prestige, which for some reason is also showing, even though they came out a little bit apart. But you're like, fuck it. I don't want to see The Illusionist in theaters anymore. I'm leaving. And you go watch fucking Prestige. And if you're Seth, you think that they're not fucking clones, but they're totally fucking clones, by the way. Fuck you, Seth. Anyway, Illusionist like a 2, and Norton. It's probably an Oscar worthy or some bullshit. I don't fucking know with that man. And then you know what? Let's get newer. Let's talk about Motherless Brooklyn. Oh my God. I wish it was Fatherless too. This movie sucked. This movie sucks so bad. It's just this big jerk off of bullshit that has the worst crime story in it. And it made $18 million. This movie made $18 million. And I'll tell you why it made $18 million. Because white people fucking exist. This movie sucked so bad. It's based off a book from 1999. You could have fooled me into thinking this book was older. This movie sucks. It's just boring as fuck. It's like watching the fucking Irishman, and then you're like, oh wait, Ed Norton and fucking Martin Scorsese are basically the same fucking person, except Scorsese doesn't think he's the greatest thing in the world, and Ed Norton must think he's like God's gift to fucking movies. No, Ed, no one gives a shit about your bullshit anymore, okay? Fight Club was in 99, and people still don't understand what that bullshit is about because no one fucking cares. Okay? Motherless Brooklyn's a 2, by the way. Don't fucking watch it. That's my shitty movie of the week, but still, don't watch it, but watch it. You tried to act like you were the best part of Birdman. Motherfucker, I didn't even care that you were in Birdman. You couldn't have been in Birdman. I would have been fine. Grand Budapest Hotel? Okay, let's talk about it. You the worst part of it. Wes Anderson makes the best movies, and just you can put any goddamn actors in the fucking role, and they're still gonna be fine. We don't need you, Norton. You racist bastard. Fuck you. I'm tired of this bullshit. Why do they have me watch Ed Norton movies? Huh? Ed Norton fucking blows.
Welcome back to the show.
Hey.
We're here with Adam talking about American History X. Now, I know what you're thinking. How
Seth,
dare you?
just restart, Seth. I said K at the same exact time that you started talking. I was just like, I know exactly how that's gonna sound. And when I listen back to this, I'm gonna hate myself. I'm very stressed out about it. So, all right.
This is all
Go ahead,
staying in.
So
No.
it's funny that you drew attention to it, because likely if I heard it happen when I was editing back, I would have cut it out and you would have never heard it. But now that we've drawn attention to it, my inkling is to leave it
For only
in.
$1 a month, you too can hear this on Patreon.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I'll do another one. Okay. Welcome back to the Film Rescue Show. We're here with Adam discussing American History X. Now, I know what you're thinking. How dare you guys talk about a good movie? You've been influenced by Mike Spielman's section too much, is what I would say back to you. We're here to talk about a good movie because sometimes updates and changes are beneficial. Also, sometimes people love things so much they want to tweak little things about them instead of, a page one rewrite, which is not what's happening here. So, without further ado, let me turn things over to Adam to pitch his redo / update / whatever we decide this is going to be repitch for American History X.
All right. Let's do it. So, like, why did I do this? Right? Why did I write this 6-page fucking like Shakespearean tragedy based on a 1998 Shakespearean tragedy?
Mhm.
Basically, after watching Green Room, which everyone on here has seen it, but if you're listening, you haven't seen it. It's basically a punk band plays at a Nazi thing, and they have to basically fight these Nazis. Nazis are the bad guys. This punk band are the protagonists. I loved that movie, but the primary flaw that stuck out to me was that the Nazis were just they were just the bad guys, and it was just a low-hanging fruit of being bad guys. And in no way did it address ideology or that they're bad because of their ideology. They just happened to be bad guys that were Nazis, and it was just they didn't have to be Nazis. They could have been literally any bad guys.
Yeah,
other than, like,
it's easy.
a
It's
few
easy to
aspects.
hate Nazis,
Right.
It was such a low-hanging fruit, and I even watched an interview with the director, who I saw that other movie did, Blue Ruin, which I loved as well.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite.
He's
movies.
great, but in a interview, he was like, "Yeah, I didn't really want to go into ideology." I was like, "Okay, then don't put Nazis in your movie." I don't know.
Right.
And that's his. He can do that, but I had I was thinking about that, and I was like, man, I thought it could have been like, it would have been up there with movies like American History X, had they at least touched on it a little bit to me. And I'm fascinated with that subgenre of film, of these anti-fascist movies like Inglourious Basterds, V for Vendetta, American History X being one of the best ones. So I just started sitting on it and trying to come up with, with, as we talked about far-right politics in a little bit in the modern day, I think we've seen a little bit of music that touches on the subject, but not a lot in film. And I think that now is a good time for some sort of anti-fascist film that touches on these subjects. Something not, I didn't see The Hunt, but it looked. Seth, you said it wasn't as cringe as the trailer made it
Man,
seem, but
there is cringe. Let me tell you. But
I couldn't believe it's real watching the trailer.
It's one of those things that looks like it was written a little more straightforward, and then they were like, yeah, but what if we did one more twist? And it gets so twisty that it's hard to keep track of, is this satire or parody? And it never really lands on anything. So yeah, no satire or parody in your Nazi stuff. We don't need to confuse that.
So anyway, I think right now could really benefit from a film like American History X, and seeing as obviously we're not going to remake American History X in 2020 because it doesn't make any sense. None of this is really real, but it's a fun thing to talk about with this pitch and how I rewrote it to be more modern day. And it starts at the same exact time or around the same time in the 90s, and kind of goes into today. So things that stay the same, most of the characters stay the same. Derek's crime, it would be similar, I guess, but it would be done in a way where he ends up in prison for much longer, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Much more accurate to actual law enforcement.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So maybe, and seeing as he clearly has committed other crimes based on the grocery store scene, so it wouldn't be hard. Anyway, Derek basically ends up in prison longer. Much of Derek's time in prison would be very similar. Derek would still be a skinhead leader. And then also, like, it wouldn't maybe be covered in a day. Maybe it would be a day, but just like the movie, Derek would only be out of prison for a very short time before the film ends. Things that change. I put it in Austin, Texas, and we talked a little bit about the Venice Beach decision being a little bit odd. I thought about the Pacific Northwest, but I wanted to include the issue of Confederate monuments.
Oh,
which has been an issue. That was a lot about what the Charlottesville rally issue was about, were Confederate monuments. So I went with Austin, Texas. It's also where Alex Jones is based, and in this pitch there is a big right-wing podcast, not in the same exact vein as Alex Jones, but it kind of alludes to that and that kind of world. And
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, all right. Film starts with Derek's crime in the same way. He does something with the crime in the same way, but in a way that makes him go to prison for longer. We're in the late 90s, maybe in 2000. So let's say what happens in 2000. And he gets a 25-year sentence, gets released a little bit early in 2019. Just as he got released a little bit early in the movie.
yeah.
So we have scenes that establish Derek as a white supremacist gang leader in the area. He's very important to that community as an organizer, basically as the second in command for Cameron. I'm going to put Seth. Seth has a little bit of a larger role in this. He's basically third in command behind Cameron and Derek. He's not as smart or as good as an organizer as Derek, but he's very loyal to the cause. And he's very clearly could be a successor to Derek if anything happened to Derek. There's only going to be there's 3 children. I got rid of the baby. Well, actually, Danny's the baby.
Yeah.
So it's Davina, Derek, and Danny, but Danny's the baby because I want when Derek gets out of prison in 19 years, I want Danny to be a young adult, like 20 or whatever he's going to be.
Okay.
I don't need the baby. The baby didn't help anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, baby.
Was it ever confirmed whose kid that was?
No, we discussed that.
It's odd.
We discussed that previously.
I don't think the timeline works.
If it doesn't work, she was very pregnant in one scene where it's not expressly said that she should have been, or
Right.
Who knows? I'm in the conspiracy theory camp of that it's the teacher's kid from a fling.
Fair enough.
But there's no way they would not address that.
Well,
Okay.
also they didn't address the
Whatever.
Crips, which is
I got rid of the baby. Or at least the baby is Danny.
Yeah. So you were on.
Yep.
Seth is very loyal to the cause. He's like third in command.
Yes. I clicked too far down on my Word document. So, Derek's prison story goes very similarly. He joins a white supremacist gang. He finds that they don't really adhere to the ideology, which makes him question the ideology a bit altogether. Is this really legit? He befriends Lamont, and Sweeney visits him, brings him, or maybe in some other way he acquires books, starts reading and studying and learning, starts questioning some things. He slowly climbs out of this ideological hole. Now remember, I have him in there for 19 years. I don't have him in there for 3 years.
Right.
In which his turn only took the last 6 months.
Yeah.
It's
a little
I have him in
too
there for a
long.
long time. So,
Yeah.
what, 19 years?
No. I mean, like
Or-
the 2.5 years of still being on the side of white supremacists, and then in 6 months he
Right.
changes. Like, it's a little lopsided.
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially because of how confident he comes out, like, in believing in himself, and I'm going to do this, and, like, in 6 months, I think you'd still be, I have a much slower progression and transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be much more complete when he gets out. So I have Lamont and Derek talking, reminiscing about stuff that happened in the 90s. They talk about basketball. They, just as in the movie, they argue about the Lakers and the Celtics. But then they start talking about the 92 Rodney King riots. And we get a bit of a toned-down version of the original film's dinner table scene on that same subject, except this time it's with Lamont. And Derek still, even though he's climbing out of his ideology a little bit, he still obviously holds a lot of these beliefs. And Derek says, he talks about how he felt the writers were acting like animals, and he goes through a lot of that same stuff that he spews in the dinner table scene.
Yeah.
And they should have been working. They should have been taking care of their families, not protesting, And Lamont tells him that, look, you're not going to understand the struggles of a black man without, like, communicating with us. Lamont reveals that his father was unjustly killed by the police. And he himself ended up with a long prison sentence due to the racial bias of the justice system. In which, he was charged with assaulting a police officer. I want them to a little more directly address, like, that we're in here same amount of time, my crime was way less than yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we
And my
discussed
dad-
earlier, how Lamont is in prison for a long period of time for a pointless crime. That happens even more often now.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And your dad, yeah, I get it. Your dad died from a gang violence thing. That sucks. But we can connect over this because my dad got killed by a police officer for no reason. They can connect over that. And Derek reflects on that, and he's taken aback. And this is his first, he doesn't have a lot of experience talking to black men and their struggles. So this is sort of a big moment for Derek.
yeah. Just last night, I actually rewatched the movie Blind Spotting.
Oh my God.
I watched that after I watched Good Time. I was really on a trip for some really awful feeling films.
Right.
Blind Spotting is about a guy that's on probation, and on his 3 days before his probation is up, he witnesses a cop gun down an armed black man in the street. But he can't have any interactions with the cops, otherwise he'll go back to prison. So he has to just keep it to himself that he saw a black guy get gunned down in the street, and he is black. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all about that that tension in society, how it's always there no matter what you do.
All right, so we're going through a lot of the same things that he goes through in leaving the white supremacist gang. First, because he's questioning the ideology, both from not thinking that these guys are super as into it as he was, and then also he's realizing his friendship with Lamont and what he's reading is changing him. So the way that the gang gets back at him, instead of the rape scene, they actually kill Lamont to get back at Derek.
Ooh.
Because they see Derek as a race traitor. And yeah, I think that gives Lamont a bigger role. It gets away from the trope a little bit. Lamont's a bit more of a interesting character with that, and it's a heartbreaking moment for Derek. That really is the big turning point for him. You know, he's like, wait, I've been thinking that the people of my race are supreme and we're the best and we're the nicest, but then I befriended this guy and you guys just killed him just because you were mad at me. It's a big turning point for him. So throughout his time in prison, he's periodically visited by his family, Davina, his mom, and Danny. We see Danny growing up through these periodic scenes. We see him growing up because he's a baby when he goes to prison. So we see him a little bit. I know in the original movie he doesn't want anybody visiting him, but I guess since he's in there longer, it makes sense to see them a little bit. Dr. Sweeney visits him periodically as well, brings him books, helps him emotionally recover from the murder of his friend Lamont. Seth visits him as well. Dr. Sweeney appears periodically to sort of show the progression of Derek's ideology, because they discuss those things, and he finds comfort in Dr. Sweeney. Davina could be a part of that as well, since she's a lot closer to Derek's age, and I wanted a little bit of a bigger role for Davina. So early on in the sentence, when Seth is visiting him, Seth tells Derek about how now he is basically second in command. He's in charge of the gang. He's taken over Derek's role. And he's like, I'm trying to be more like you, Derek. You're a legend in our community now. Just as he was, the Psalmist of God, they saw him as a legend because of what he did. As Derek's shifting his ideology, and he's still visited by Seth, you're seeing Seth now develop. He's becoming smarter. He's more polished. He's more articulate. He's becoming a little bit more. He's growing out his hair. He looks a bit more. He's getting a little bit of a more mainstream look, because this is how the movement's changing on the outside, while Derek's inside and still thinks it's the same out there. Seth tells Derek that Cameron passed away because he was really old. So the gang sort of disbands because Cameron was really the main. He was the money. He was the organization behind it. And he tells Derek, look, the movement's changing now because of the internet. He tells Derek he started a podcast or some sort of internet show where he talks about the news and historical events from like a far white supremacist angle, and that he wants to get an interview with Derek because he's still a legend in a certain section of that community. And Derek declines. He says, no, I'm not into that anymore. And that's just where he has the scene with Seth that I wanted to ask Seth. Look, Seth, I've seen these things on the inside. Maybe it's a similar conversation to what he has with Danny on the bleachers, where he talks about what he's gone through with prison. He asks him to reconsider his beliefs, and Seth says no. Anything you want to talk about? Want me to keep going?
I just want to make the note that Brandon had a little something like that in his Rambo Last Blood pitch.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today.
Yeah,
I think
I didn't see Last Bloods. I didn't listen to that episode. I saw the trailer.
You don't need
to. Honestly, you don't need to see.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say mine was a page 1 rewrite, but maybe like page 5 or 10. So.
Yeah.
Most of it's rewritten, redone.
Right.
Meant to bring it full circle to the original film, but also the antagonists are neo-Nazis.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
that would have been cool.
I like that. It was basically Green Room meets Rambo, kind of.
Yeah.
Pacific Northwest, and
instead, isn't it kind of just like racist instead?
It's Mexican cartels, but there's no positive representation of Mexico. Therefore, it says, "Oh,
Great.
fuck all Mexicans."
Yeah, Rambo
Excellent.
versus immigration.
Yeah.
Cool.
I wanted to point out in the pitch you sent me, you mentioned that Seth only has 85 downloads, and like that
Oh yeah.
that split me because
Yeah.
I've not only been there, but I'm also like, yeah, fucking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's and this is kind of showing when he's still super extreme at this point.
Mhm.
So he still only appeals to a small part of the community,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why he's stoked he's up to 85 downloads. This is also pretty early on in this in the realm of these podcasts and internet shows.
Yeah.
So he thinks 85 is dope.
Well, also they feel that they are a bigger influence than they actually are. Like in current day politics, like when they had that rally in Washington D.C. like a year or two ago, how many people showed up? Like 20.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like they think they're bigger than they actually are. It's just that it seems like they have a big, wide influence, but it's really just a very small subsect of American culture that has a very loud voice because, thank you, internet.
Well, and also anonymity. You know what I mean? Like they get to hide behind things, but when they have to put a face on it, all of a sudden,
We've experienced that directly.
right?
You know who I'm talking about.
I do.
He started posting crap on his Twitter page again about the Snyder Cut.
Wonderful.
Like I said, those films appeal to a very specific group of people. Mm-hmm. There's your proof. Anyways, continue.
Flash forward.
I had to get Zack Snyder in there somehow.
Right.
He's who I want directing this.
Oh, perfect.
God damn, no. Oh, God. Like, half the movie's going to be in slow motion.
To be fair, half of this movie
All right,
is in slow motion, but it's the 90s.
Yes, but it's operatically in slow motion, not because, hey, I don't have any other better visuals to put into the movie.
Right.
All right, so we flash forward a good bit to like 2019. Sweeney's talking with Derek, and they're pumped. They find out that he's going to be released early. He's only going to have to serve like 19 years of a 25-year sentence. He tells Derek that, hey, Danny he was my student in high school. He took a few years off, and he's going to start taking classes at the local community college, and actually I teach there now.
Oh, wow.
Sweeney teaches there now. Dr. Sweeney moved up to college. So,
What a guy.
so we get more of a, more Sweeney. So
I'll always
the
take
mood
more Avery
shifts.
Brooks.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, and anytime there's more Cisco, I'm here for it. I'm a defender of Deep Space Nine.
He hasn't done much recently. He hasn't done anything. Yeah, it's kind of a shame. Anyways,
So the mood shifts in the conversation. Sweeney warns Derek. He's like, hey, I've seen Danny online lately, and it's kind of disturbing. He's posting really cringy white supremacist stuff, and he's kind of going down the same path you were going, but also the movement's a little bit different now. And so he tells Derek, he's like, look, Derek, talk to Danny, have him sign up for a class I'm teaching. It's called American History X. That's how I get that back in there. I thought about having the podcast called that, but I couldn't figure out a way to do that.
If you were doing
so that's how
if you were doing like a reboot, I could see that being like a cool little twist for sure.
Yeah. So that's what I do. I have Sweeney's teaching a college class. Derek makes Danny go to it. It's called American History X. And it basically explores American history through the lenses of minority groups who have suffered. So, you see a lot of tweets that's like, oh, I never learned this in history class.
Yeah.
Because it's also like people that never read anything about history other than what they learned in history class. But, it covers stuff like the Tulsa race riots and, stuff that you didn't learn in history class, but you learn, later on and stuff. And it's
honestly, I didn't even know about that till Watchmen.
Sure,
Yeah,
I know
like-
a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, when Watchmen is more accurate historically than actual history classes, that's a sad sign about American education system.
Also, this was directed by a Brit too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that's another thing I brought up recently is that I think it was on our Punisher Warzone episode to have Steve McQueen direct a Punisher movie. Like, he is British.
Yeah.
A British person addressing like an American character has a different feel
Yeah.
than an American addressing an American character. It would just feel different.
Totally.
it adds a little bit something extra. There's this extra level of, I guess, cynicism
Yeah.
to it all. You know, there's that article that came out recently from I think it was Norway that said we used to idolize America, now we pity them.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's what Europeans think of America now. So it is what it is.
It's fair.
Yeah, it is fair.
So, all right, the next call Derek has in prison is with Danny, who's like 20 now. They catch up a little bit. They talk about how Derek's going to get out of prison in a few weeks, and Derek tells Danny, like, dude, I'm proud of you for starting at community college, and I really want you to take Dr. Sweeney's class. I've known Dr. Sweeney for a long time. He's helped me with a lot of stuff. I think it'd be really good for you to take this class. And Danny laughs it off, and he's like, I didn't even want to sign up for classes. Like, Mom made me do it. I've been out of high school for a couple of years, and she's making me do this. And then he calls Dr. Sweeney a slur, revealing directly to Derek that he's basically adopted Derek's ways and followed in his footsteps. Says he doesn't want to be subject to Sweeney's propaganda in that class. Derek scolds him. He says, "Don't say stuff like that. Danny, I don't want you to end up like me." He tells Danny he's got to sign up for the class, in which Danny reluctantly agrees. Derek then asks Danny, he's like, when did you start saying stuff like that? Because when Derek went to prison, he was a baby, and he only sees him periodically. He's like, when did you start talking like that? Danny tells him that Seth actually recruited him to work for his podcast right when he got out of high school, and Seth had stayed close with him throughout this time, sort of acting as the brotherly figure when Derek was gone. And that's what he's been doing since he got out of high school the last couple of years. He's been working for Seth's show, which is a lot bigger now. But Derek mocks the show because he remembered it only had 85 downloads. And Danny's like, no, dude, it's pretty big. He's got a paid staff. We're kind of breaking into the mainstream, which sort of hints at in a way where these fringe things like Alex Jones have broken into the mainstream under Trump.
Yeah.
Where what was once fringe and kind of funny is now mainstream and much scarier.
Do you guys remember when InfoWars was just stickers on stop signs?
Well, I don't know, and I don't know if that was everywhere, Seth, but it was definitely where we grew up.
There was 5 in Hagerstown that I counted.
And they're still up there.
Oh my God!
And there's more of them, and there's even at the corner of at a corner on Dual Highway, right by where I used to work at the Sonic. There's a sign that linking you to David Duke's website.
Oh God!
Good grief.
Hey,
Yeah.
so Adam and
And-
I grew up in a weird place.
But
Yeah.
We did grow up in a very weird place, and Hagerstown had a branch of I don't remember what the name of this group was, but at the time it was the biggest. It was basically the biggest neo-Nazi group in the early 2000s. Hagerstown had a branch. It was based in I think the Martinsburg area. For a time, it was kind of it was like by the author of the Turner Diaries had this group, and it was in that area. So I think that's where a lot of that stuff came from. I mean, I remember being very impacted when KKK rallies came to the Antietam battlefield.
Yeah, I remember that.
Sharpsburg.
I remember.
I was very young, and and I remember it was the first time I'd seen live music because my brother's band was playing at this some sort of church function where they were trying to get kids to go to this instead of to the hate rally, and just that having a huge effect on me. I was 10 or something, and that being a very early look into these things.
Yeah.
and how it's popular. And even though it wasn't a big rally, not a lot of people went to the rally, but just that it being that close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we grew up in a weird place.
I mean, we are in Maryland, so we're right on the Mason-Dixon line.
Yep.
Between North and South. We're right there. There's a lot of really smart people, and there's also a lot of fucking morons. It's hard to escape it.
Yeah.
So, but even like I said, up north, most racist city in northern part of the country, New York City. It's hard to escape this.
Yeah.
So
It's all around.
It's everywhere.
Back.
So Derek's distraught by learning that, oh shit, Seth's thing that I thought was just this dumb fringe thing is actually huge, and he's gotten my brother into it. Like, this is not ideal, and I can't do anything for another few weeks until I get out of prison. So then he gets out of prison in a few weeks, goes home, catches up with Mom and Davina briefly. Mom tells Derek that Danny's left for class, so Derek heads over to the community college because he knows Danny's at Dr. Sweeney's class. He wants to see both of them. Derek arrives at the college. He notices some flyers on some cars. When he gets there, he looks at the flyer. It's promoting a counter-protest coming up. It's basically a counter-protest that will take place in downtown Austin. It says it's going to oppose a racist, homophobic hate group rally. Is basically what it says. It just so that's being done. But he sees the people giving out the flyers. They're just kids putting it on the cars. So Derek walks into Sweeney's lecture. He's teaching about the Ferguson protest in 2014 and the killing of Michael Brown. He sees Danny speak up, saying that he didn't understand why all these people were protesting. They should have been at work rather than yelling at police officers, creating a whole mess about nothing. It's similar to, it calls back to the argument we saw earlier that I put in this pitch, where Derek and Lamont discuss the Rodney King riots.
Yeah.
And Derek sees Danny saying the same crap that he said, and he really sees that Danny has now gone down the same path. And before anybody else can chime in, Derek actually chimes in, and he channels Lamont, his old deceased friend, in his argument, and says that the interaction didn't need to end in lethal force, and white people need to understand what the black community has been through in regards to police violence since Jim Crow, the Tulsa riots, the civil rights movement, Rodney King, Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray. He calls back to a lot of this stuff that he learned and that he saw happen throughout his time in prison, and he learned about reading. And he channels, like I said, he channels his old friend Lamont in sort of an emotional moment because, again, Lamont was killed by the people that Derek was once a part of their ideology.
Right.
Danny's shocked to he's just surprised to see his brother, basically. And they kind of smile at each other because it's like, who's saying that? Oh, and you see this is his brother. So they kind of smile at each other. Sweeney wraps up the class, and we see Derek and Danny talking. Derek's like, hey, I'll take you home. But Danny says, no, I got to stop by the studio first. The studio being where Seth's podcast takes place and where Danny works. So Derek goes with Danny to Seth's studio, and we see even a bigger transformation with Seth. He's super polished, sophisticated, professional looking, and more important, he's super charismatic. He's very much taken on this role of this far-right media personality. Seth and Derek greet each other warmly, even though their last exchange was kind of negative. They were still best friends, before everything happened. So this is the first time we see Stacy since Derek's crime. Stacy is the head producer of Seth's show, and Stacy and Seth are getting married. So it kind of shows that Seth almost, in a way, purposely went after Derek's life for abandoning the ideology.
Right.
He hired his brother to get him into it. He hired Stacy. He started dating Stacy. He really took over Derek's life while he was gone. And Derek's in awe of the studio because it's super impressive. He's very much realizing now that this is bigger than he thought it was. Seth talks more about how successful the show's become, and Derek's shocked by this. He thought, when he left the white supremacist ideology, it couldn't have this mainstream success. It was just a fringe thing. He couldn't have ever dreamt of this back when he was the gang leader. So Seth explains it, and he says, we had to get away from the swastikas, we had to get away from the red laces, and we had to frame our points around free speech, opposing political correctness, stopping Mexicans coming across the border, and that's what people want to hear. That's how you get people to defend the purity of their race. Yeah, he throws in some crazy Jewish conspiracies on air just to, appease a certain crowd. But, Cameron and his Turner Diaries, far right-wing literature and stuff, that was just for, like, old survivalist nerds and nuts and stuff that have gotten locked up since then or have died. That's not how you reach the masses. That's not how you organize. And we see in Seth basically the same way we saw in the original film of Cameron being the personification of that movement. Seth is the personification of these far right beliefs' entrance into the mainstream, and it terrifies Derek. Because when Derek went to prison, it was a fringe thing.
Yeah.
Seth reveals he's leading a rally tomorrow in Austin to oppose the removal of a Confederate monument and that Derek should come by. Seth says, look, like, should be 100 people, maybe even more. And he says, look, back in the day, we could only get like a dozen people to come out. Now we've got 100, kind of taking a dig at Derek and his organizing abilities. And Derek realizes this is the same rally that he saw the flyer for on campus, except that Seth is the hate group that the flyer is referencing. Right. And that, the flyer was for the counter protest, and Seth is the one leading the rally. Derek tells him, he's look, I'm not into that stuff anymore, and maybe the monument does need to come down. He's like, talks about his perspective and the people he met in prison, and maybe it needs to come down, and that it might be offensive to some. And Danny's shocked by this. He can't believe Derek's saying this, and that Derek's not into the racism stuff anymore. Seth's like, Derek, dude, what happened to you? And how'd you get all brainwashed in prison? And Derek tells Seth that his podcast is actually what's brainwashing people. Just like Cameron's literature brainwashed Derek and Seth back in the 90s. He says, your podcast is doing the same thing that Cameron's literature did to us. Seth scoffs. And Derek asks, hey, Seth, you still want me to do that interview? Because maybe your listeners would like to hear my perspective. Maybe they need to find out what happened to Derek Vineyard. Because Derek still thinks, certainly he must matter in this community. He was a god to them at one point because of his crime. And Seth laughs at him, and he's like, you don't matter anymore. Like, that was 20 years ago. We've entered the mainstream. It's not like that anymore. You're just a fossil to this movement. You're irrelevant. You're irrelevant just like Cameron's irrelevant. And, like, this is the new way of this ideology. And Derek tells Seth, he's like, look, I'm nothing like Cameron, and I'm nothing like you. Stay away from Danny. But Seth's like, Danny's going to be next to me tomorrow at our protest. So I keep going. We're almost done.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm on board.
All right.
Well, I'll jump in if I have questions. I'm just kind of enthralled.
On the way home, Derek and Danny are arguing. Kind of like when they Danny was very mad at him on the way home from the party in the original film. Derek finally gets a chance to explain to Danny what happened in prison, how he left this ideology behind, just like the scene on the bleachers. Derek tells Danny about his friend Lamont as he fights back tears and what happened to Lamont. Danny connects with what Derek is saying, and Derek takes out the flyer for the counter-protest for the rally and says, Danny, dude, don't go to this tomorrow. And Danny's thinking about it, but then Derek tells Danny, Seth doesn't care about you. He's just trying to use you to get to me, just like he's doing with Stacy. And that makes Derek upset because it makes Danny upset because he feels like he's been a valuable part to the success of the podcast and moving this into the mainstream, and it matters a lot to him. So Danny's conflicting with, like, I want to follow my brother, but I'm in this now. I worked hard in this. This matters to me. So Danny gets angry, and Derek points to the flyer and asks if he's on their side, referring to the counter protesters. And Derek says, look, I think they're right, but like I can't get involved because I was just released from prison. I need to stay out of trouble. So Danny leaves, and he says, see you on the other side, because he expects that they're going to be on the opposite sides of the protest. So the day of the protests, or next day, in the original film, this was the next day where Danny's going off to school, but here they're going off to this protest. Danny's gone when Derek wakes up. Derek's getting ready, and his mom's like, please don't go. You just released from prison. You got to stay out of trouble. He's like, I know, Mom, but I'm just going so I can keep an eye on Danny, make sure he doesn't do anything stupid or get hurt. At the demonstration, we see Seth and Stacy leading about 100 supporters gathered around this monument. Seth and Stacy lead chants, supporting keeping the monument, while Danny's live streaming content for the podcast social media pages from his phone. Across, kind of be like where Seth was filming stuff on the video camera in the original film. So across the street, we see about the same number of counter-protesters opposing the rally, and they've got chants and signs of their own. Derek slips in kind of in the back of the counter-protesters. He joins in some chants occasionally, but he tries to just to show that he supports what they're doing, but he's trying to stay reserved, stay out of the way, and keep an eye on Danny for the most part. At this time, there's some tensions between the opposing groups. They're shouting at each other, but they are on different sides of the streets. Then we see a small group join Seth's demonstration. This is a little bit of an older crowd, decked in more military gear. Seems like a little out of place with the more mainstream-looking people in Seth's group. Derek realizes a lot of these guys were the guys that he hung out with in the 90s that were in the skinhead groups.
Yeah.
These are the older guys from that movement.
Are you getting into these
necessar-
people that do this open carry bullshit?
They're basically those guys
those
decked
people.
in militia gear. Look, I live right across from the Pennsylvania State Capitol.
Yeah.
And where they had a massive rally here, and I'm just trying to take my dog out, and people are walking by me with AR-15s, and I'm like, please don't hurt my dog. And it was it was a very crazy day for me. So it's like those guys in this military gear and in gear that sort of resembles the skinhead style, but obviously these guys are older.
Right.
So Derek recognizes them as that group. Seth tells this group's leader that came up, and he's like, hey, thanks for coming and strengthening our numbers. But Seth sees like some of these guys have iron crosses and swastikas and little 88 patches and stuff on their sleeves of their gear, and some of them even have the red bootlaces. And Seth's like, look, that's kind of a bad look for my thing I got going on here. Like, obviously Seth still believes in all that, but he's trying to be mainstream. And he's like, it's bad look, that makes us look bad. We're trying to like live stream this and like have a serious movement. And they're like, look, Seth, if you want our numbers, you get our uniforms too. So Seth's like, all right, fine. So those guys join the movement, or join the protest on Seth's side. The presence of that more militant faction quickly causes increased tensions between both groups. So the side that Derek's on with the counter-protesters, and Seth and Danny's side that's leading the protest. Seth and the counter-protesters, they kind of get in the middle of the street a little bit and start arguing. Some shoving breaks out between the two sides, a little bit of punches, because stuff has escalated now that these really militant guys have showed up. Punches are happening. Danny gets knocked down because he's trying to film, so he's not really paying attention. He gets knocked down, and he's kind of in danger of being trampled on, which Derek sees, and Derek's calling out for Danny. Danny hears him. He's screaming for Derek. He hears his brother, and he needs help because he's getting trampled. And Derek's trying to push through everybody to get to the other side, which, when you're trying to push through two sides of opposing forces, that's going to be seen as aggressive. So then there's a gunshot. And everyone just kind of stops, and we see one of the members of the militant faction of Seth's group holding a gun, and he gets tackled by people on both sides. Nobody wanted this. Nobody wanted anybody to get shot until this militant faction showed up. So this fighting stops. Seth is like freaking out. He's like, what did you do? Because now his side looks terrible. He didn't want this. He wanted to be mainstream and be taken seriously. And now they've shot somebody. And this is when it's revealed that Derek was the one who got shot, trying to push through to get Danny. And Danny gets up, he finds Derek, and he's holding Derek as he dies, realizing in this that Derek was right, that the ideology has brought him and his family nothing but pain and suffering. And Danny's sobbing and saying he's sorry for not listening to Derek. And Derek, in his last word, doesn't blame Danny. He blames himself because he knows that it was his decisions in the 90s and everything that he did that made Danny go down this path. Derek dies, and Danny holds Derek in the same kind of heartbreaking fashion that we see Derek holding Danny's body in the original film. And, I killed Derek instead of Danny, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I like. You did. I read this when you first sent it in, and I knew I wanted to get you on as soon as possible because one of my
and you had never seen the film.
Yeah, but without even having seen the film, I was picking out the things that I would later see in the movie. And a big part of it is Derek is Danny's patriarch. Like, biologically, it's his brother, but he holds him to the ascension as a father. And
he's a father figure for him because their father was killed.
Exactly. And you extending his time in prison so that his interactions with Derek's, I guess, notoriety develop him very early. And so it makes it even more apparent and more obvious that he looks up to Derek in this kind of hero dad figure instead of as a brother. And you also gave him the time to develop as a person so that his accomplishments are his own. And that's the split is, what he has done on his own, almost in defiance of his brother being in jail. And then his brother leaving and finding out that he's totally diametrically opposed to it. That was the...
Yeah, he's with Seth, and he hears about how his brother's a legend as he's growing up. And he's like, well, he misses his brother so much, just as Derek turns in the original film after losing his dad and follows his dad's ideology. Danny missing his brother and hearing about how great he was in his ideology makes him go down that path.
That was the hook for me reading your pitch and then seeing that happen in the movie, because this is, emotionally almost exactly the same through line. Seeing that happen in the movie, that's what really kept me on board with hell yeah, this is a fucking great movie. I was very involved because of that, because of the way they laid it out in a different way, and it needed its own nuance. But I think this makes it a little harder to avoid. That it really was his actions in the 90s that leads up to the end result.
Mm-hmm. And it reinforces that idea that it's a cycle that is endless.
Right. It's just enough time for that 10-year cycle to have passed and to come back into relevance, because he was coming off the end of the 90s and now coming into the early or later 20 what are we calling those? The 10s?
Something like that, yeah, 2010s.
Yeah.
We'll call it that.
Sure. Hell yeah. Yeah, just... if this is
I also...
Go ahead.
Gives... I think we have a more clear antagonist, more clear antagonist in this, and in being Seth.
Yeah.
Even if Seth was subject to the same... propaganda that Derek was, and he was preyed upon when he was a kid. We see how self-serving he is even in Derek's death, because he sees Derek die, and all Seth can think about is how this affects his podcast and his company and his movement. Right. He just knows how bad of a look this is going to be. It's not about his friend dying or anything.
Yeah.
Whereas Danny is realizing that his brother and his family are what's important, and he should have been listening to his brother this whole time, and that he was used to push Seth's agenda instead of listening to his family.
Yeah. Brandon, how about you? Did any scenes jump out to you?
Brandon.
Oh.
Maybe we've lost.
No, we're no. We're
Nope.
hey, we're good. We're good.
He was
I
he was muted. That's
said
all.
Something else.
Oh, there you
We're
are.
good. Yeah, I forgot to hit the unmute. Sorry. Yeah, no,
No problem.
I think that by spreading this out over a longer period of time, gives more of a chance for things to basically stew under the surface, rather than things kind of shifting gears 3.5 years later. And yeah, to see like that podcast become this giant following and evolution in basically the worst possible way, definitely gives a greater force to the antagonist in this case. And I also like what was done with Lamont in this incarnation, that there was more of a reason for Derek and Lamont to connect, and more of a motivating factor for Derek as well. So yeah, no, I think this was the best way to bring this into the modern setting while also still having acknowledgement to its original time period.
Right. Yeah.
But
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, on that note, I do gotta skedaddle, but that being said, that was a great pitch. I know the big question that we all had when this was announced was how could we possibly bring this into the forefront of 2020, and I think this nails it.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Well, Brandon's gonna bounce, but I'll bounce to Adam. Do you have any? I know you've got some casting ideas that you'd like to hit on.
I have a few. I was more interested in what you guys would think. You guys are more of the film buffs who know a lot of these guys more. So as Derek, I just kept picturing Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah.
He's about the age that I think he would. I don't know. JGL is probably like 30, or he started like 40, maybe.
Yep.
So like if he went into prison when he was like 20, it kind of would make sense. I've always loved JGL.
Me too.
I think he's great. I mean, I couldn't really think of anybody else in that age range. Like James Franco would not be a good choice.
No.
I want a strong lead in the same way that Edward Norton is. I think he would be capable of doing it.
You know who would be like just the wildest visual to see the 90s version versus the like reformed version? Chris Evans, like
Oh yeah.
yoked, strapped up as a skinhead, and then
Yeah.
evolving into his like kind of more modern actual personality.
Go watch a movie called The Iceman, where he plays a serial killer
I've never
that
seen
drives.
that.
Oh, it's really good. He did it right after I think the first Captain America, and he plays a guy who's kind of a sociopathic murderer.
Interesting.
And it's all about this guy who was a hitman. Eventually, he got arrested.
Yeah.
But these two guys, they've been kind of caught, and they need to escape from their lives. So Chris Evans' character says, "Would you kill my family for me? I'll do your family, you do mine." And so that way they can change their identities and they can escape from from getting busted by the cops.
Wow.
Interesting.
If you want to see him play a horrible, horrible person, that's a movie to go to because he knows how to play bad really, really well.
That's Michael
I
Shannon.
didn't think about.
Yes. Yeah. Good film.
I was trying hard to stay away from the comic book movie actors, but it is hard.
Everyone's been in one. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's tough.
And JGL is a perfect choice, especially because he seeing him do a body transformation like Edward Norton. I mean, like body goals, dude. He was yoked up for this movie. So seeing Joseph Gordon-Levitt doing that, I'm on board. Like I'm not knocking it at all.
All right, so I guess we'll move on to Danny. I don't know many 20-ish people. I mean, I went with Tom Holland, but I felt like it was a bit of a cop out.
Yeah, it's easy go-to.
It is a very easy go-to for that age range. But that scene in Infinity War where he's vanishing, and he just desperately goes to Tony Stark for help. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to like that. I mean, that was very an emotional moment
Sure.
for me as a big Spider-Man fan. I think he was. I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen.
Endgame.
What was the second one? No, sorry, the second Spider-Man.
Oh, Far From Home.
Yeah, Far From Home.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. So
Yeah,
I haven't seen all of his work
It's fine.
in it, but I loved him in that scene, and I could picture. I wanted that type of emotion in the scene where Derek
Sure.
dies, where he's holding him. I mean, it would be reverse role, but he's holding him and just like sobbing, and he pulled that thing off right. I didn't have really any other options. Like I said, a bit of a
Yeah,
cop out, but I think he'd be
That
good.
that's kind of like the role that makes sense too. Like, let's just assume we're going Oscar bait, like the first one was. Tom Holland playing an alt-right, far-right, fascist character is so far away from the MCU. That's how he opens up his future, career path to do anything. Didn't Danny Radcliffe played a skinhead recently, didn't he?
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
not seen that movie, but I really want to. A trailer looked great.
Imperium, I think was what it was called.
Yep.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah. So
Has anybody seen Neo Ned?
No.
Me neither. But I want. But I have you? Do you know what it is?
no.
Oh my God! Do a quick Google search right now of Neo Ned.
Neo Ned.
It is Jeremy Renner. Jeremy Renner plays a neo-Nazi, and he's like in a mental institution, and he falls in love with a black woman who thinks she's Hitler reincarnated.
The fuck?
I have no idea. I can't find it anywhere. I need to watch it so bad.
It's funny. We just recently talked about Captain Marvel, and the directors of that did It's Kind of a Funny Story, which is one of my favorite mental institution films. This looks like that, but with Nazis in it.
Just the premise is insane.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, I loved It's Kind of a Funny Story. That was a really good movie. It does look like that, but with with
Interesting.
I can't find it anywhere. All I can find is a trailer, which is just as ridiculous as the premise sounds.
I'm gonna
All
do
those also Ethan Suplee is in this film as well.
Is that just his thing?
Is he really?
That's
Yeah,
gotta be
he
his
is.
thing.
He is.
That's so funny.
That rules, and I'm sure he plays the same character.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ethan Suplee, you had him coming back.
He's back, baby. He's back. Skinny Ethan Suplee is back as Seth.
I would love if
That could be the change. You see him in the 90s and he's fat, and you see him
Yeah.
in modern day and he's all ripped.
he's all strapped up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I dropped my mic. Yes, I thought that I couldn't think of anybody else. I couldn't think of anybody else, and I went with him because I think right when I was watching this, I had seen like his like a workout video he was doing, and I was like, look, as I was writing it, he's who I was thinking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
so
he's
I
a
put him back in
Scientologist.
there.
God damn it.
Welcome to L.A.
Fuck. Damn it. I liked him. And now I don't. Fuck. Shit.
Who are some of your other? I think you have a couple of recasts.
Lamont. We need a strong role for Lamont because I think he plays. He has a big role in this.
If it were
I honestly wrote this a while ago. I'm like, who is Javon Ladipo?
Yeah.
I brought him in there. Who is this person?
I recognized his face when I looked him up on Google.
Oh, he was in. Okay, have you guys seen Overlord?
Yo, yeah,
Oh, yeah, that guy.
He was. Yeah, I thought he was fantastic.
he was.
in that.
I
movie.
can't stop singing the praises of that
he's
movie.
British. Yeah, I loved that movie.
Me too.
It's a small scale. It would have been really cool to see it on like a big scale. It's very, it's condensed.
I think
but
that's why I
love
like
that.
it because it's so condensed. It feels like they just knew they wanted to make a movie and they made a movie.
Yeah, it is a good movie. So I have him as Lamont. I have Anthony Mackie, but I'm trying not to make this a Avengers.
Sure.
The Avengers Nazis. Like
What's the actor that played Bubbles on The Wire? What's his name?
Oh, yeah.
Andre Royo.
There you go.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, choose somebody that's like a known actor, but not like a very well-known actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
William Jackson Harper from The Good Place could also be a good
Yeah.
It's similar build, similar kind of, even maybe pull into his like philosophy thing. Maybe he's got some ideas on stuff in prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As Sweeney, I had the only person I thought of first was David Harewood. I don't know if you guys have seen Man in the High Castle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He is Equiano Hampton in the last season. He has a small role. It's a big role, but he's not on screen a lot. But he's basically the Black Resistance Party in that movie or in the show. He's like their main leader, and he only has one scene that is he has one big scene, and it is probably the best. It's one of the best scenes of the whole show.
Yeah.
Where he's talking about like the struggles the Black community went through since the Nazis took over in the show, and it is one of my favorite scenes of that whole very frustrating show. That I love that show, but I kind of hate it too. But he was great, and that's just who I thought of first.
Yeah. The one that popped into my head as I was reading, Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Andre Braugher. He could.
Yeah.
I mean, he does the whole like highbrow, big Ivy League school kind of stuff so well. I could totally see. I mean, he's basically doing exactly the same role again. But I could totally see.
I mean, the original actor was in the This Is Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure he's much older now.
For sure.
But I mean, if he could redo it, that would just be fine. I wrote it still. I mean, he's the same character. Yeah. I wrote him the same way,
And then you, in the email you sent for Stacy, you had a question mark.
I have a question mark and directed. I don't know. That's where you guys.
I've got an idea for Stacy, but only if you guys know.
Hell yeah.
My Name is Earl.
A little bit, not too much.
So Ethan Suplee is in that. He plays Earl's brother.
Oh yeah, I know that part.
Earl's ex-wife, Jamie Presley, is who plays her. I could totally see throwing herself into that kind of role. And just
you're so right.
Just to have that.
How old is she now?
She's about Ethan's age. So aged up to 2019, she would look totally accurate. You might have to do a little de-aging for the 90s scenes when she's younger, but just for the My Name is Earl reunion, I'm here for it.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, cool. So let's just make Derek Earl. Like, let's just go all in on it.
Jamie Lee,
what the guy's name is, but yeah, we're all in.
He's a little goofy. I'm not gonna say I wouldn't hate to see him do a super serious role like that, but he's a little. He's got kind of a comedy face, if that makes any sense.
That we can bring in the Chipmunks too. Like we'll have the whole gang back together in a. Yeah, that's all I had, and I didn't have a director. I would honestly love the I forget his name, but the director of Green Room and Blue Room.
Saulnier.
Jeremy Saulnier.
Yeah.
But again, at the beginning I talked about he didn't go far enough into this in Green Room. It was the biggest flaw to me, so he would probably not be the best choice for this. But I do love his movies. He's fantastic.
Sure. Well, I did say earlier on that like people that since the original director was British, having a British or just even like just a non-American director would actually probably help the tone. Sure. I mentioned Steve McQueen earlier on.
Yeah,
there's a good choice. Like he knows how to make movies that make you feel like complete shit. It's like,
True.
Hey, that first 15 minutes make you feel like shit. Guess what? You have another hour and a half to go until you're done.
Yeah, Steve McQueen's take.
Yeah, maybe this version would be a little more. Try to make it a little bit more watchable. I don't know. You got to do that, but I want,
I do like the fact that your version
would be a little bit enjoyable.
Your version covers a lot of territory from the shit that we're dealing with now, like these open carry idiots. Like it's like they're supposed to be about Nazis, but they're defending Confederate statues, which has nothing to do with Nazism at all.
Right.
Like it's very like going after right wing people. It's clearly like edging into the MAGA group.
Yeah,
people that use media like podcasts and web shows and webcasts to spout hate, like right-wing philosophy and things like that, like Alex Jones. Like
Yeah, I
People
don't.
that lean into conspiracy theories, thinking the government is horrible, yet they idolize Trump. It's like, how can you be pro Donald Trump and yet hate big government?
Right.
Like the cognitive dissonance is insane to me. I just don't get it.
I don't know if it was intentional, but the fact that the finale of your story feels like it splits like the North Carolina rallies with a Steven Crowder video, like it's almost got that same feel to me. It, being on a this is on a campus, right?
It would be, I think, I was looking up monuments in there. I think there's one at the Texas State
Okay.
Capitol in Austin. I think that's where I was kind of picturing
Yeah.
it, especially as someone that lives right across from.
And Seth is kind of there to do
Pennsylvania
like
State
man on
Capitol,
the
had
street
that in mind.
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was. I wrote it with Charlottesville
Sure.
in mind mostly, and the killing of Heather. I forget her last name, but the woman who died from the violence in that rally.
Right.
I wanted it on a smaller. It's a smaller rally in my pitch, and I didn't want to just be completely like obviously thinking
Yeah.
of that. But I kind of had that in mind, and then Danny is live streaming for, and you see a lot in these the Portland rallies and that were happening late last year, almost every weekend between far right groups
Yeah.
and local counter protesters.
I'm kind of shocked.
they're
I'm
live
kind
streaming
of shocked
the
that
whole time.
Portland has such a high right wing group there. It's like it's Portland. It's like
Yeah,
whenever I think
gotta
Portland, I
check out-
think Portlandia. Like
Yeah.
it's liberally minded group of people, and it's like apparently it's the opposite.
Yeah, a huge part of this of that movement started and existed. Oregon used to be an all-white state where they
Yeah.
literally didn't allow slavery because they didn't want any black people there. It is like one of the whitest states.
We're
tried to
so
be
white
an
you can't
ethno
even have
state.
slaves.
Mm.
Jesus,
Exactly.
we're
that's-
too
and that's
American
what it
for
was.
America. God.
And the skinhead skinhead movement was huge there. There were some famous skinhead killings back in the 80s and 90s in that area. It's a huge it was a huge I thought, and like I said, I thought about putting this movie there, but I wanted to use the Confederate statue aspect because that's very current, has been a current issue in the last 5
Mhm.
years. But yeah, Oregon is it's a big haven. It's a big haven for that, but it's also a big haven for both sides of it. People that hate it and people that are
Yeah.
that way.
Mm.
And that's where Green Room is either in Washington or Oregon, but either
I think
way,
it's Washington
it's a
State.
big thing up there.
I think it's Washington State because
But
I think they're traveling across the border. I think, as far as I remember. It's been a while since I've watched Green Room, but yeah, I believe it is in Washington State.
Yeah, it's been a minute for me too. I don't recall exactly. Yeah, maybe this would be a fun one to open up to the audience. Who do you think should direct a reboot-quel? I guess is the best way to put this. Because you could literally switch out names and make this a sequel.
It could have also been. It
Yeah.
could be. I mean, you could rework it to be its own
Yeah,
movie.
100%.
also,
It's
but
not American
I don't-
History X, it's American History Z, the current generation.
Ooh,
I don't write movies. This will never be a movie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a screenwriter, so this is how I could put this idea into. The only way I could put it into reality is making it.
Well, considering
Related
the
to American
director's
History
response
X,
to this film, there won't ever be any sequel to this film.
mm.
Yeah, the director didn't like that the studio fucked with the movie, and he disowned it for a long time. Eventually, he did watch it, and he said, "Yeah, it's actually pretty good."
Yeah.
So he actually said it was ego that was impeding his opinions of the film back
Yeah,
when he
no
was working
kidding.
on
He
it.
put out like 40 pages of ads telling people not to see it.
Yeah, he spent like $500,000 of the studio's own money to derail and trash the movie.
Yeah,
It's like, Jesus Christ. Of course he didn't get much work after that.
that might be indicative of all the work that we mentioned before that was put into the unique filmmaking style and what he was going for. I can definitely see getting caught up in the weeds, not seeing that the end of your movie is maybe a little dissonant. Yeah, we'll throw this one out to the audience. I think Steve McQueen's definitely a great choice. Gareth Edwards, I know, just for another British outside voice, I could totally see him running with this kind of material and being okay with studio rewrites making his movie better.
Is there any movie he's ever worked on that has not had a studio rewrite?
It's just that's why you hire hip young indie filmmakers.
It's also could be a British movie based in the UK, and they have a lot of the same.
Yeah.
They have a lot of the same similar groups, similar issues. I know a lot about their groups and stuff there as well. It could have been. I could have rewritten it to be in the UK. So that's an option too in this fantasy world where I write.
With the way politics are going in India, you could set this in India real easy too.
Sure. That might actually be my best bet, is to make it like a foreign language film and make it in a totally different country.
I mean, because
that might be the best way.
Like we said, this film is timeless.
Right.
Like, you can apply it to anywhere. You can swap names, you can swap characters, you can swap locations, but the general theme is about race and race relations.
Right.
It's very timeless.
Yeah, for sure.
Brazil.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
With a little bit more adaptation, you could even set this in Hong Kong currently. You know what I mean? Like, yikes.
Oof, that's a rough one.
So, glad we got to talk about a great movie and also be a little sad the whole time.
Yeah, the next episodes will not be this political. I would like to throw one thing out there. I mentioned earlier Josh Dysart's tweet about Venice Beach. Check out a book that he wrote called Goodnight Paradise from TKO Comics. It's about the poor and underprivileged in Los Angeles and how it disproportionately affects ethnic groups, Black, Hispanic, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't really get into too much about how Derek likes to go on about how it's not like a poverty thing that's causing, racial tensions. It's just that, there are people that are just not white. Like Derek opens up with like, no, it's not about poverty, but no, it's usually about poverty. It's like
poverty
it's
affects...
usually about that, poverty disproportionately affects, ethnic groups that aren't white people. Like it's, Asian, Hispanic, Black, it's Indian. Disproportionately in America, it affects that.
And it affects educational systems, transportation systems, jobs, food, literally every aspect of your life. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my bosses, when I was working a different job, he tried to tell me that private schools are cheaper than public schools. This is a very right-wing Republican guy, and he sent me to this website where it was like total right-wing horse shit. And I said, okay, if they're so much more cheap, then why are they not so popular in the inner cities? And he just kind of yelled at me and screamed at me. Yeah. It's like people like that typically don't listen when you try to send them to, give any kind of real reason as to why they're wrong. What was the quote that I heard? Best way to piss off a Trump supporter, quote Trump back to them, and they'll get pissed off.
It's true.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. We won't get this political on the next couple of shows.
I have doubts about Gattaca. I'm not sure where we're going to go with that, but
that's not really about... Gattaca is more like about like genetics, and it's more science fiction. It's edging into politics, but not so much.
Yeah, I just can see us easily going into eugenics. Anyways, Adam, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me and for listening to my thing that I made up in this cool fantasy world where
I live in that fantasy world too. I've got some bangers in the hypothetical world.
You've made yours real.
Yeah.
You've made yours. You guys are all work on your own film projects and stuff. And this was a new experience for me that I went down just as a fan of the show. So I appreciate you guys having me on and letting me go a little bit political. I tried to stay, true to the film's part of political. You guys then took it and ran a little bit with more but that's so I'll throw that on
Yeah,
you guys.
no, totally on us.
I'll blame you.
You brought us the film, and that's all. Definitely, please, if you have any more pitches, come back someday. Assuming we don't get to the movie before you do by accident. Would you like to let everybody know where they can check out your stuff that you have going on, music and otherwise?
Yeah, again, just check out my band. We're called New Seasons. We have only one song out right now. It's called Temporary Relief. So wherever you get your music, we have a music video too. Just search New Seasons, Temporary Relief. Check it out. We're on Instagram. You can follow us on Spotify or whatever so you see when our next music comes out. Other than that, if you want to find me personally, at Adam Morris Peters on Instagram. I do some modeling on the side, and I got a dog, and that's most of the content you see. It's pretty wholesome. Good stuff. Other than that, yeah, thanks guys just for having me on here to talk about this.
Absolutely, it was a good time. I'm glad I finally got to knock this one off the bucket list for me. This is one of the.
Yeah, you guys got to watch. You guys hadn't seen. I mean, I hadn't seen it until last year. It seemed like none of us really grew up with it, which is probably good. It's a very great movie for kids, but yeah, it's something. It's kind of newer to me as well, but it did become quickly one of my favorite movies, and so I had a lot of fun with this.
Wonderful. Jesse, you have a podcast.
Yeah, we have That Weird Ass Game, where we talk about weird and out there video games, and our next episode coming up is about Deus Ex: The Conspiracy, which is also very political considering the current time frame we're living in right now. It's not really a weird game, but if you play it in current times, you realize there's a lot of parallels going on in that storyline compared to what we have now.
Right.
Yeah. So
there is this not well known video game called it's a Star Wars game. It's called Jedi Power Battles. It came out in right after Phantom Menace. And I think it's the best video game of all time. Yet, when you look it up, it has 2-star reviews, and you can't find it anywhere. But if you ever get a PlayStation 1 again, and you want to borrow Jedi Power Battles, which to me is the best game of all time, let me know. I still have it.
Nice. Well, you can play PS1 games on a PS3. They play on PS3.
Interesting.
Yeah, but you can't play PS2 games, though. Only PS3. PS3 can play PS1.
Well, why, yeah, of course. I mean, why would
Why be backwards compatible to one of the best systems of all time?
Yeah.
If
then you can't buy it again.
Exactly. And then they're going to undo all that with PS5. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
If you, like Adam, would like to be on the show, all you have to do is pick your film, send us at least one sentence of a pitch for how you would like to fix your movie. I think.
What about 6 pages?
Hey,
Seth?
that's. I mean, you're definitely top 10%. We have got longer, I promise. And we have had shorter as well. So you definitely fall into this is good. I think 6 pages. Jesse, you kind of fall into the 6 to 10 area when you're doing your synopsis.
Yeah, it's a good middle ground. I mean, obviously the longest one we had was BVS.
Right. But even
that was But even that
11 pages or something like that.
It was 10 pages.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
but it was all single space. It's a long movie and it's a lot of stuff in it, so it was hard to really shrink that down.
Right.
So, but something whereas with It Chapter 2 was only bullet points. We didn't redo the whole thing. We just redid the last act of the film. Yeah, if you're doing a page 1 rewrite, I think we're finding 2 pages per act is the sweet spot. But again, if literally you have one issue and you want to only talk about that, and we'll go out in the weeds to pitch other versions of a movie, I promise. That's at Film Rescue Show on Twitter or filmrescueshow@gmail.com. We'll get your pitch, we'll read it, we'll respond, we'll work things out, and we'll get you on the show. Apart from that, the only other thing we have is a Patreon, patreon.com/MonTresserMedia, where you can get extended and unreleased and uncut versions of the podcast, as well as other content as we work on it and put it out. Early episodes coming soon, where you'll be able to listen to stuff a week before it releases to the public. We got a lot in the works brewing over on that Patreon, but we do have consistent uploads of uncut content, usually between 10 and 20 extra minutes, if not more. So you can check that out for $1
over on patreon.com/MonTresterMedia. I think that'll about do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Sounds good to me.
Gentlemen, wonderful speaking to you. To the audience, thank you so much for listening, and have a good night.
night.